Rain hammered against the mansion's glass walls, each drop echoing like a warning from heaven. Eliza Holloway, 6 months pregnant, stood at the bottom of the marble staircase, trembling. Her husband Chase towered above her, his face red with fury, the stench of whiskey heavy in the air. "You've ruined my life," he shouted, his voice slicing through the storm. She pressed a hand to her swollen belly, her voice shaking. "Please, Chase, stop yelling. You're scaring the baby." But Chase wasn't listening. He never really did. To the outside world, he was a polished millionaire, a real estate mogul adored by the press. Behind closed doors, he was something else entirely. Cruel, impatient, obsessed with control. Tonight, his temper had crossed the final line. Eliza had refused to sign papers giving him full control of their joint assets. He called it business. She called it betrayal. The argument turned brutal in seconds. He grabbed her arm, squeezing until she cried out. "You think you can leave me?" He spat, pushing her backward. Her foot slipped on the slick marble. The world tilted. For a heartbeat, silence, then the sickening thud of her body hitting the stairs. Her cry was drowned by thunder. A pool of blood spread beneath her, dark and growing. Chase froze, eyes wide, not from guilt, but fear. No, you can't die on me," he muttered, shaking her shoulder. Her lips moved, a whisper barely audible. "Our baby." Then her eyes closed. He stood there for a moment, breathing hard. Then something inside him snapped into cold calculation. He wiped his hands, straightened his shirt, and called his driver. "There was an accident," he said flatly. "Clean this up before the press finds out." Not once did he look back at his wife, lying motionless on the cold marble. When the ambulance arrived, Chase was gone. The paramedics found Eliza barely alive, pulse faint. One of them whispered, "If we don't get her to the hospital now, she'll lose both lives." They rushed her into the stormy night, sirens screaming through the city. At the hospital, the doctor's voice broke the silence. "We saved her, but the baby didn't make it." Eliza's heart shattered in that sterile room. Her entire body shook, not from pain, but from the realization that the man she loved had killed everything she held dear. And somewhere across the ocean, in a secluded estate in Switzerland, a phone rang in the middle of the night. An old man's trembling hand answered it. The voice on the other end whispered the words that would awaken a sleeping storm. "Sir, it's about your daughter." Bold cliffhanger. That was the night the world learned what happens when a monster hurts the wrong woman's child. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and sorrow. Machines beeped in slow rhythm beside Eliza's bed, each sound reminding her she was alive when her baby was not. The morning sun spilled through the blinds, painting her pale face in fragile light. Her hands, once trembling with hope, now lay motionless. When she tried to speak, only a broken whisper escaped. "My baby, is he gone?" The nurse avoided her gaze. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Holloway. We did everything we could." That name, Holloway, cut deeper than any wound. She wished she could rip it off her soul. Every breath felt like glass in her lungs. The doctor's words replayed in her head. "You survived, but the trauma was severe." She had bruises from her shoulders to her ribs, a fracture on her arm, and a heartbreak that medicine couldn't touch. Chase didn't visit, not once. But his PR team did. 2 men in expensive suits arrived that afternoon carrying a legal envelope. "Mr. Holloway sends his regards," one of them said, his tone clinical. "He wants to make sure the media doesn't misunderstand last night's incident. He's prepared a statement for you to sign." Eliza stared at the papers. It said she had fallen accidentally and that her husband immediately called for help. Her hand shook. "He hit me," she said softly. The man's polite smile froze. "Mrs. Holloway, let's not make this emotional. You sign this. You'll receive full medical coverage and a private settlement. If you refuse..." His voice trailed off, sharp as a knife. The nurse, an older woman named Clara, stepped forward. "She's in no condition to talk about this now." The men exchanged a look and left. Clara lingered, her eyes soft with pity. "You should rest, dear." But Eliza couldn't rest. That night, she heard whispers in the hallway. Reporters trying to get inside, hospital staff gossiping about the Millionaire scandal. Even sedatives couldn't numb her thoughts. When she finally fell asleep, nightmares clawed through her mind. Her baby's tiny hand slipping away, Chase's voice echoing like thunder. 3 days later, the hospital discharged her under family request. 2 guards escorted her out of the back entrance to avoid cameras. A luxury car waited, Not Chase's, but his lawyer's. He didn't come himself. Instead, he sent a note. You'll stay at the lake house until things calm down. Don't contact anyone. The lake house was beautiful and prison-like. No phone, no internet, no visitors. The windows overlooked still, empty water. Every night, Eliza woke to the sound of her own screams. Grief twisted inside her until she barely recognized her reflection. But one person hadn't forgotten her. On the 5th night, a knock came at the door. Clara, the nurse, stepped inside, eyes full of urgency. I can't stay long, she whispered, slipping an envelope into Eliza's trembling hands. He needed to know. Eliza frowned. Who? Your father, Clara said. Richard Monroe. The name hit her like a lightning bolt. The man she hadn't spoken to in 10 years. The man she blamed for her mother's death. No, she whispered. He can't know. He mustn't. But Clara pressed her hand gently. He already does, sweetheart. He's coming. Bold cliffhanger. And when Richard Monroe came for his daughter, he didn't come with flowers. He came with a war. Snow fell silently over Geneva as a black limousine wound its way up a mountain road toward a secluded estate. Inside sat Richard Monroe, silver-haired, expression carved from stone. The message from Nurse Clara still burned in his mind. Your daughter is alive, but she's lost the baby. The words had gutted him more deeply than any business failure ever could. He hadn't seen Eliza in over 10 years. 10 years of distance, guilt, and silence. In the world's eyes, Richard Monroe was a ghost. The reclusive billionaire who once built empires across Europe and America, then vanished after his wife's death. But behind that quiet disappearance was a man crushed by regret. He had chased power while his family fell apart. When his wife Laura took their daughter and disappeared, he told himself it was for the best. But hearing that Eliza had been beaten nearly to death shattered whatever peace he had left. The car pulled through the wrought iron gates of his mansion. His assistant, a calm woman named Evelyn, waited by the door. Sir, the investigation team has gathered everything you asked for, she said softly. Background on Chase Holloway. His company, assets, offshore accounts, everything. Richard nodded slowly. Good. And the girl? She's at the Holloway Lake House. He's keeping her isolated. No phone, no press contact. For the first time in years, his composure cracked. He's imprisoning her, he murmured, anger flickering beneath his calm. He turned toward the fireplace, staring into the flames. When I was her age, I thought power could protect the people I loved. I was wrong. This time, power will destroy the man who hurt her. Across the ocean, at that very moment, Chase Holloway sat in his penthouse giving a TV interview. He played the grieving husband, spinning lies about a tragic accident. The audience ate it up. My wife has been through so much, he said solemnly, pretending to wipe away a tear. All I want is her recovery. Cameras flashed, headlines blazed with sympathy. But the next morning, his assistant handed him a folder. Sir, a new investor just bought 11% of Holloway Developments. Chase smirked. Good, we need strong partners. The assistant hesitated. It's Monroe Holdings, sir. The name froze Chase mid-laugh. He leaned forward. Monroe as in Richard Monroe? Yes, sir. The billionaire. He's expanding his portfolio. Chase's eyes darkened. Find out everything about him. Meanwhile, back at the lake house, Eliza sat by the window watching snow fall into the still water. For days she'd refused food, refused to speak. Her body was healing, but her soul felt hollow. Then a small knock broke the silence. She opened the door and gasped. Evelyn stood there, calm but firm. Miss Monroe, she said softly, using the name Eliza hadn't heard in a decade. Your father sent me. He wants you home. Tears filled Eliza's eyes. I don't have a home, she whispered. Evelyn's gaze softened. You will, and the man who did this to you, he'll wish he never touched you. That night, a private jet waited at the nearby airstrip. As the engines roared to life, Eliza looked out the window, the lake shrinking beneath her. She wasn't ready for revenge, not yet. But somewhere deep inside, something began to stir. A spark of the Monroe blood she'd tried to deny. Bold cliffhanger. And when she finally stood beside her father again, the world would soon learn. No empire is strong enough to survive a father's wrath. The private jet landed in Boston under the veil of dawn. The runway was empty except for 2 black SUVs waiting beside a discreet hangar. Richard Monroe stepped out first, his tailored coat whipping in the wind. His eyes were sharp, scanning every corner like a man returning to a battlefield he swore he'd never revisit. Behind him, Eliza followed slowly, frail, pale, a shadow of the girl he once knew. For a moment they stood there, neither able to speak. Years of silence, regret, and distance hung between them, heavier than the winter fog. Richard finally took a step forward. "Eliza," he said softly. His voice cracked on her name. She flinched slightly, not out of fear but pain. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He swallowed hard. "And leave you there? With that animal? I've already made that mistake once. I won't do it again." They drove to a secluded Monroe property on the outskirts of the city, a mansion hidden behind acres of frozen woods. It was quiet, peaceful, almost sacred. Inside, the warmth of the fire contrasted with the icy air of tension. Evelyn helped Eliza settle in, but she sat stiffly on the couch, her hands gripping the cup of tea like it was her last anchor to reality. Richard watched her from across the room. "You're safe now?" he said gently. She shook her head. "Safe? He'll find me. He always finds me. You don't understand, Dad. Chase doesn't forgive. He destroys." Richard's jaw tightened. Then he's about to learn what destruction really looks like. Her eyes filled with tears. "You think revenge will fix this? I lost my baby." The words tore out of her like glass. "I can't eat. I can't sleep. I can't breathe without hearing his voice." He walked to her slowly, sitting beside her. "I know I wasn't there when you needed me. I failed your mother, and I failed you. But this—" he reached for her trembling hands, "this is my chance to make it right." Eliza looked at him through tears. "You don't even know who he is." "Oh, I know," Richard said quietly. "I've read every file, every transaction, every lie. I know he's laundering money through shell companies. I know he bribed officials. And I know he made you sign those fake accident papers." Her lips parted in shock. "How? How did you get all that?" He smiled faintly. "The world thinks I disappeared. They forget. Ghosts can move unseen." That night, while Eliza slept for the first time in days, Richard stood alone in his study. The room was lined with monitors and files. Photos of Chase appeared on the screens. Business meetings, parties, even secret dinners with his mistress. A man like him thought he was untouchable. Richard intended to prove him wrong. He picked up the phone and dialed. "Evelyn," he said, his tone steel. "Activate Project Aegis. I want full surveillance on Holloway developments and discreetly acquire all his outstanding debts. By the time he wakes up, I want his empire under my thumb." Evelyn's calm voice replied, "Understood, sir." As he hung up, Richard glanced toward the window where the snow was falling harder now, burying everything in white. "You wanted war, Chase," he murmured. "You just declared it." Bold cliffhanger. By sunrise, the man who destroyed Eliza's life would realize he just sold his soul to her father. Chase Holloway woke up in his penthouse to the sound of city sirens and the flash of cameras outside. For days, gossip columns had been buzzing about the accident involving his wife. His PR team had spun the story perfectly. He was the heartbroken husband, the victim of tragedy. Public sympathy flooded in. Stock prices soared. To the world, he was still the golden boy of Boston's elite. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, scrolling through the morning headlines. "Tragic fall leaves millionaire's wife in recovery." Another article read, "Business titan stands by his beloved wife." He smirked. "Beloved," he muttered, "if only they knew." The doorbell rang. His assistant, Nolan, hurried in with a tablet. "Sir, something strange came up this morning. A private fund just purchased 30% of your company's outstanding shares under the name Aegis Capital." Chase frowned. "Never heard of them. Who's behind it?" "Can't tell. They're using offshore accounts. Cayman, Luxembourg, Singapore. All clean, but efficient." Chase leaned back in his chair. "Find out who they are. No one moves in on me without paying." But even as he spoke, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. "Nice empire. Shame how fragile it is." Attached was a photo, his mistress, Vanessa, leaving his penthouse at midnight, followed by another image of a suitcase filled with cash. Chase's blood ran cold. Someone was watching him. He looked up sharply. "Who leaked this?" Nolan hesitated. "We don't know, sir. But if this gets out—" Chase slammed his fist on the desk. "It won't. Handle it." Meanwhile, across town, Richard Monroe sat in his study, watching the same images appear on his monitor. His network of investigators worked with surgical precision. Every scandal, every secret, exposed piece by piece. "Let him sweat," Richard murmured. "Fear will make him careless." At that same moment, Eliza sat by the fireplace in her father's mansion, wrapped in a blanket. Evelyn joined her quietly. "You should eat something," she said gently. Eliza stared into the flames. "He's probably on television right now, pretending to mourn me." Evelyn hesitated, then handed her a tablet. "You should see this." On the screen played a clip from a live news broadcast. Chase, standing before cameras, somber and composed. "My wife is recovering in a private facility. I love her dearly, and I ask for privacy in this difficult time." Eliza's lip trembled. "He killed my baby." Evelyn placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Then let the world see who he really is. You don't need to scream to destroy a man like him. You just need the truth." That night, while Chase entertained investors at a luxury bar, one of his contacts pulled him aside. "You're in trouble, Holloway," the man whispered. "Someone's buying out your debts. Someone powerful. The name Monroe keeps coming up." Chase froze. "Monroe? As in Richard Monroe?" The man nodded. "The same. Word is he's back, and he's coming for blood." Chase laughed nervously, though his pulse spiked. "That old fossil? He's been dead to business for a decade." The man shrugged. "Maybe, but if I were you, I'd start praying." Chase turned toward the city skyline, his reflection warped in the glass. For the first time in years, fear crept into his bones. Somewhere out there, an unseen enemy was tightening a noose, and he didn't even know why. Bold cliffhanger. He didn't know it yet, but every empire he built was already collapsing, one silent signature at a time. Eliza awoke in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat. The mansion was silent except for the faint crackle of the fire downstairs. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same nightmare. Her baby's tiny hand slipping away, Chase's furious face above her, and the sound of her own scream echoing down the marble stairs. She pressed a shaking hand to her stomach, whispering through tears, "I'm sorry. I couldn't save you." For days she refused to speak, refused to eat. Her body was healing, but her mind was trapped inside that night. The staff moved quietly around her, afraid to disturb her silence. Richard watched from a distance, helpless. He had spent his life controlling everything, markets, boardrooms, governments, but he couldn't control the grief inside his daughter's eyes. One morning, he sat beside her on the balcony, the winter air biting cold. "You know," he said softly, "when your mother died, I stopped living too. I buried myself in work and called it survival. But it was cowardice." Eliza didn't look at him. "You weren't there for us." He nodded slowly. "You're right. I wasn't. I thought success could make up for absence. It doesn't." He paused, voice thick with regret. "But I can be here now, if you let me." Tears burned her eyes. "You can't bring him back, Dad. My baby's gone." "No," he said gently, "but you're still here, and he deserves to have a mother who lives, not one who dies in silence." That night, Evelyn entered the study holding a folder. "Sir, we traced the offshore accounts. Chase has been laundering investor funds through dummy companies. If we expose this, his empire collapses." Richard looked at Eliza, who had been standing quietly in the doorway. "What do you want me to do?" he asked her. She hesitated. "You want me to say destroy him?" "I want you to choose," he said simply. Eliza's eyes glistened. "I don't want revenge," she whispered. "I just want him to face the truth, to feel what he made me feel." Richard's expression softened. "Then we'll give him that, and more." The next day, news outlets began receiving anonymous tips, financial documents, wire transfers, and photos of Chase with his mistress, Vanessa, in private villas and hotel rooms. The headlines shifted overnight from sympathy to suspicion. Billionaire's charity funds under audit. Sources question Holloway marriage scandal. In his office, Chase exploded. "Who's feeding them this garbage?" he shouted, slamming his phone. His assistant stammered, "Sir, I think it's coming from someone inside our investor group." "Find them," Chase growled, "and make them disappear." Meanwhile, in the Monroe mansion, Eliza walked through the grand hallway dressed in soft gray. Her steps were slow but steady. She stopped in front of a nursery that had been empty for years, her mother's old room for her. Inside were dusty toys, faded wallpaper, and an unfinished music box. She wound it gently. A soft lullaby filled the air. Richard appeared behind her. "That was yours," he said quietly. "You used to fall asleep to it." Eliza looked at him with tears in her eyes but managed a small smile. "Then I'll keep it. For him." For the first time, she didn't cry when she said her baby's name. Something in her had shifted, not healed, but hardened. She wasn't the same fragile woman who had fallen down those stairs. She was something new, Bold cliffhanger. And as the storm gathered outside, Eliza whispered to herself, "If he made me break, I'll show him what breaking really means." Morning light filtered through the Monroe estate, touching the edges of power and pain that filled the house. Eliza sat in the library, surrounded by piles of documents. Evelyn had brought them, financial reports, emails, letters, each one another brick in the wall closing around Chase Holloway. "These," Evelyn said, sliding a flash drive across the table, "were taken from his private server. He's been funneling investor money into illegal property deals overseas. If this goes public, he's finished." Eliza turned the flash drive in her hand, her reflection glinting on its metallic surface. "How did you get these?" Evelyn gave a small, mysterious smile. "Let's just say, there are people who still owe your father favors." Richard entered the room, his presence commanding but calm. "We move carefully. Chase still has influence. The wrong leak could turn the press against us." Eliza looked up at him. "He doesn't deserve careful, Dad." Her voice carried a quiet fire. "He deserves to lose everything he ever used to hurt people." Richard studied her, then nodded. "You're starting to sound like me." She met his gaze. "No, I'm starting to sound like someone who's done being afraid." That night, Evelyn arranged a private meeting between Richard and a financial journalist named Marcus Kane, a man known for exposing corporate corruption. They met at a dimly lit restaurant in downtown Boston, one where deals and betrayals were often traded over fine wine. Richard arrived first, discreet and composed. "Mr. Monroe," Marcus greeted, sliding into the booth. "You've been a ghost for years. Why break silence now?" Richard's eyes hardened. "Because a man who calls himself a leader beat my daughter until she lost her child. And I intend to make him answer for it." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You're asking me to start a war?" Richard leaned forward. "No, I'm giving you the truth. What you do with it, that's up to you." He placed a sealed envelope on the table. Inside were the documents, proof of Chase's embezzlement, photos with government officials, even wire transfers signed in his name. Marcus hesitated. "This could destroy him." "That's the point," Richard replied, "but publish only after I tell you. There's one more piece missing." The next morning, Eliza walked into the study holding her phone. "You said you had everything," she said to Evelyn. "But there's something you don't know." She opened a video file. It was grainy, but the sound was unmistakable. Chase's voice, shouting, the thud of impact, and her own scream. The timestamp showed the night she lost her baby. Evelyn gasped softly. "Where did you—" "It was on our home security system," Eliza whispered. "He thought he deleted it, but the backup uploaded to the cloud automatically." Richard froze. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then he said, "Eliza, this is the evidence we needed. This will end him completely." She stared at the screen, trembling but resolute. "No, Dad, it's not just evidence, it's my voice, my pain, and I'll be the one to show the world." Richard's expression softened, pride and sorrow blending in his eyes. "Then we'll do it your way." That evening, under the silver light of the moon, Eliza stood by the window, watching the snow fall again. But this time she didn't feel cold. She felt power humming quietly beneath her grief, a strength born from survival. Bold cliffhanger. Tomorrow the world would hear her scream, not as a victim, but as the beginning of Chase Holloway's end. It was the night Boston society gathered for the annual Crescent Foundation Gala, a glittering event filled with diamond smiles, champagne flutes, and whispered scandals. Cameras flashed as limousines pulled up in front of the Grand Hotel ballroom. Inside, Chase Holloway stood among his circle of power brokers, every inch the polished millionaire he pretended to be. He laughed, shook hands, and pretended not to notice the growing rumors swirling around him. To the world, he was still the successful, grieving husband. But tonight, he would learn that ghosts don't always stay buried. Across the city, Eliza stood in front of a mirror in her father's suite. The transformation was almost unreal. Gone was the fragile, broken woman from the hospital. In her place stood someone stronger. Her hair swept back, her makeup subtle but striking, and her gown a deep shade of crimson that caught the light like liquid fire. Evelyn zipped up the dress, whispering, "You don't have to do this tonight." Eliza met her eyes through the mirror. "Yes, I do. He took everything from me. Tonight I take back my name." Richard entered quietly. For a moment, he simply looked at her, pride and sorrow etched into his features. "You remind me of your mother," he said softly. She had that same fire when she walked into a room. Eliza smiled faintly. Then let's finish what he started. The black car arrived at the gala entrance, just as the orchestra began playing. Heads turned as the red-dressed woman stepped out, her diamond earrings catching the light. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Is that Eliza Holloway? I thought she was dead, she finished with a calm smile as she passed them, her heels clicking on marble. Across the room, Chase froze mid-conversation. For a second, his mask cracked. His face went pale. Impossible, he whispered. Vanessa, his mistress, touched his arm nervously. What's wrong? But Chase didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the figure moving toward him with slow, deliberate grace. Every camera in the ballroom turned as Eliza stopped just a few feet away. Hello, Chase, she said, her voice steady, almost gentle. He stammered. Eliza, how you— Oh, relax, she interrupted. I'm not here to haunt you. I'm here to thank you. The crowd went silent. Chase forced a smile for the photographers. My wife, my ex-wife, has been through so much. I'm glad she's recovered. Eliza leaned in, her whisper icy. Recovered? You'll wish I hadn't. Then she turned toward the cameras, her expression soft but confident. I just wanted to share how grateful I am to the Crescent Foundation for supporting women recovering from domestic violence. Sometimes survival is the most powerful revenge. Gasps rippled through the audience. Reporters' phones lit up like wildfire. Chase's smile faltered. His hand trembled slightly as he raised his glass, trying to laugh it off. But across the room, Richard watched with cold satisfaction as the whispers turned into headlines in real time. Vanessa tugged at Chase's arm. People are staring, let's go. But before they could move, a journalist approached, microphone ready. Mr. Holloway, any comment on the accusations of abuse? Chase's world began to tilt. Accusations? He barked, but his voice cracked. Cameras flashed. Eliza met his eyes one last time, then turned away, the crowd parting for her like waves. Outside, snow fell softly as she stepped into her father's waiting car. Her pulse was steady, her heart lighter than it had been in months. Bold cliffhanger. Inside the gala, Chase's phone buzzed. A video message had gone viral. His own voice, her scream, the truth. And it had only just begun. The next morning, Boston woke up to chaos. The video had exploded across every platform, millions of views overnight. It was grainy, but unmistakable. Chase Holloway's voice echoed through speakers around the world. You think you can leave me? Then the sound of a slap, a thud, and Eliza's terrified scream. News anchors called it the most shocking domestic scandal of the decade. Social media was a storm of outrage. Sponsors pulled their contracts, investors panicked. And in the Holloway penthouse, the man who once ruled Boston's skyline watched his empire crumble in real time. Chase hurled his phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. Who leaked it? He bellowed. Vanessa stood trembling near the window, pale as snow. Chase, I don't know. Maybe the security company. Don't lie to me, he roared, grabbing her wrist. She cried out, pulling away. You're hurting me. That stopped him cold. For a split second, he saw himself reflected in her fear and realized he had become everything he once swore he wasn't. But the moment passed. He let go, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. Get out. Chase, please. I said get out, he shouted, and Vanessa fled, sobbing, down the hall. Across town, at the Monroe estate, Eliza sat with her father, watching the news. The anchor's voice was steady but sharp. Sources confirm the video was authenticated by digital forensics. Authorities are reopening the investigation into the Holloway domestic abuse case. Eliza's hands shook as she turned to Richard. It's out. Everyone knows. Richard nodded slowly. Now the law will do what I couldn't. Evelyn entered the room with a calm smile. The board of Holloway Developments has called an emergency meeting. Most of his partners are abandoning him. Some are even filing lawsuits. Eliza leaned back in her chair, exhaling for what felt like the first time in years. It's over, she whispered. But Richard's eyes remained sharp. No, sweetheart. It's only over when you walk into that courtroom and take back your voice. Meanwhile, Chase's lawyer tried to spin the story. At a press conference, he claimed the video was fabricated, a digital deepfake, but reporters weren't buying it. The internet was ruthless. Every frame of the video had been analyzed by experts. Every audio pattern matched Chase's voice exactly. By nightfall, the police had arrived at his penthouse with a warrant for questioning. Paparazzi swarmed as he was escorted into a waiting car. Cameras flashed like lightning. For the first time in his life, Chase looked small, just another man brought down by his own arrogance. Inside the interrogation room, his lawyer whispered, "Don't speak without me." But Chase wasn't listening. His mind kept replaying Eliza's face at the gala, calm and unafraid. He slammed his fists on the table. "She did this to me," he shouted. The detective across from him replied coolly, "No, Mr. Holloway, you did this to yourself." That same night, Eliza walked out into the snowy garden of her father's mansion. The wind was sharp, but she didn't feel it. She looked up at the stars, whispering softly, "It's done, little one. He can't hurt us anymore." Richard stepped outside beside her. "You did what few people have the strength to do, Eliza. You faced your monster in the light." She turned to him, tears glimmering but no longer weak. "Then maybe it's time to start living again." Bold cliffhanger. But just as peace seemed near, Evelyn rushed out with breaking news. Chase Holloway had vanished from police custody. The news hit like an earthquake. Chase Holloway escapes police custody. By sunrise, the story had flooded every channel. Reporters shouted over each other outside police headquarters, trying to explain how one of the most notorious men in the country had simply disappeared. Inside the Monroe estate, tension hung heavy in the air. Eliza gripped her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. "How could he just vanish?" she whispered. Evelyn stood by the window, scanning every update on her tablet. The transfer car was hijacked. No one saw who did it. The officers were found unconscious by the side of the road. Richard paced near the fireplace, his calm demeanor cracking for the first time. "This isn't an escape," he said darkly. "It's a cover-up. Someone helped him." Eliza's heartbeat thundered in her ears. "What if he comes here, Dad? What if he won't," Richard interrupted, his voice firm. "Not without consequence. I've already doubled security. No one gets near you without going through me." But even as he spoke, his gut twisted. He knew men like Chase. Cornered animals didn't surrender. They bit back. Meanwhile, miles away, a black SUV sped down an abandoned road outside the city. Inside, Chase sat in the back seat, blood crusted at the corner of his lip. A man in a dark coat drove silently. "You'll be safe in the cabin," the driver muttered. "No one knows it exists." Chase stared out the window, his mind a storm. Everything he'd built was gone, his company seized, his accounts frozen, his name dragged through the mud. But beneath the ruin, anger burned like gasoline. "They think they can destroy me?" he hissed. "I'll make them pay. I'll make her pay." That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. The mansion felt colder, quieter, as if something unseen was drawing near. She sat at her desk, flipping through old photos, the wedding, the trips, the fake smiles. For a moment, she almost pitied the man she once loved. Almost. A faint creak sounded from the hall. She froze. "Dad," she called out softly. No answer. Her pulse quickened. She reached for her phone, but then the door opened. It was Richard, still in his robe. "I couldn't sleep either," he said with a weary smile. "I thought I'd check on you." She exhaled shakily. "You scared me." He walked closer, resting a hand on her shoulder. "That's exactly what he used to do, didn't he? Keep you scared." Tears welled in her eyes. "Not anymore." Downstairs, Evelyn took a late call from the private investigator. Her face paled as she listened. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "When?" She hung up and ran to Richard's study. "Sir, the cabin where Chase was hiding, it burned down an hour ago, completely destroyed." Richard frowned. "Was he?" "They found 2 bodies inside," she said, "but they were too badly burned to identify." Eliza appeared in the doorway. "2 bodies," she repeated softly. Evelyn nodded. "The police think one was Chase." Eliza stood still for a long time. "Think," she echoed. "Not know." Richard looked at his daughter. "We'll find out. But for now, it's over." That night, as snow fell over the charred remains of the cabin, a shadow moved between the trees. A man with burns across his face, limping but alive. He looked back once toward the flames, then disappeared into the darkness. Bold cliffhanger. And miles away, Eliza's phone buzzed on her nightstand. A text from an unknown number. "You think I'm gone? You should know by now. Eliza, I never fall that easy." Eliza stared at the glowing screen, her breath catching in her throat. The message was short, cruel, and unmistakably him. "You think I'm gone? You should know by now, Eliza. I never fall that easy." Her fingers trembled as she reread the words. For a moment the room seemed to tilt, the air too thin, her heartbeat too loud. "Dad!" she cried out, her voice breaking the silence. Within seconds, Richard and Evelyn were in the room. "What happened?" Richard demanded. She handed him the phone. His jaw clenched as he read the text. "How old is this number?" Evelyn asked quickly. "It just came through," Eliza whispered. "Less than a minute ago." Richard's voice turned cold, professional, the voice of a man who'd once controlled entire markets with a sentence. "Trace it," he ordered. Evelyn was already on her tablet, fingers flying. After a moment, she said, "It was sent through a proxy server. The signal bounced through 3 countries, but the original tower—" She paused, her eyes widening. "It's local, less than 20 miles away." Eliza's knees weakened. "He's here," she whispered. Richard placed a hand on her shoulder, steady but firm. "He wants you afraid. That's his only weapon left." But fear wasn't the only thing spreading. Within hours, the media picked up rumors that Chase had survived the fire. Some called it a hoax, others called it a cover-up. Headlines screamed, "Dead or alive, the Millionaire monster mystery." Online forums exploded with conspiracy theories. People debated whether the burned body had been a decoy. Richard, meanwhile, moved into crisis mode. The Monroe estate became a fortress. Private security patrolling the grounds, cameras installed at every corner, vehicles checked before they left the property. But for Eliza, no amount of locks or guards could make her feel safe. That night, she sat in her old childhood room, staring at the nursery mobile her father had restored. It spun gently in the candlelight, the melody soft and haunting. She whispered to the empty air, "Why can't you just stay dead?" Downstairs, Richard met with an old contact, a man named Victor Hall, a former intelligence officer turned private security expert. "Find him," Richard said, voice like steel. "I don't care what it takes." Victor nodded. "If he's alive, we'll get him." For 2 days, there was silence. Then on the 3rd morning, Victor called. "We found the car he used after the escape, abandoned in a warehouse near the docks. And sir, there's something else." "What?" Richard asked. Victor hesitated. "There was a camera inside, hidden. It was watching the street outside your estate. It's been transmitting for days." Richard's stomach dropped. "He's been watching us." He turned to Evelyn. "Shut down every line of communication. No calls, no emails, nothing unencrypted. If he's watching, we cut him off completely." Meanwhile, Eliza tried to hold herself together. She spent hours writing in her journal, trying to make sense of her pain. But that evening, when she went to her window, she saw something that froze her blood, a single white rose lying on the garden path below. Chase's signature gesture, the same flower he used to bring after every fight. Her breath hitched. "Dad!" she shouted again. By the time Richard reached her side, the rose was already gone, carried away by the wind. Richard's eyes darkened. "He's playing with us, but he's forgetting one thing." Eliza turned to him, tears trembling in her eyes. "What's that?" "That I don't play fair." Bold cliffhanger. And as lightning cracked across the sky, Richard picked up the phone, calling someone from a past life, a man known only by one name, the cleaner. The next morning broke gray and tense over the Monroe estate. A storm was brewing over Boston Bay, clouds swirling like ash across the horizon. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere was no less charged. Richard stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear. "I need you here today," he said quietly. "It's personal." The voice on the other end chuckled darkly. "You only call me when it's personal." "Then you know it's serious," Richard replied and hung up. Hours later, a black motorcycle stopped at the front gate. The man who stepped off it was tall, lean, and carried the stillness of someone who had seen too much. His name was Kellen Pierce, though few used it. In certain circles, he was known only as the cleaner. A man who could erase problems without leaving a trace. Evelyn opened the door for him. "Mr. Monroe is expecting you," she said. Kellen nodded, removing his gloves as he entered. When he stepped into the study, Richard was waiting by the fire. "It's been a long time," Kellen said with a faint smirk. "Too long," Richard replied. "You still charge double?" "For you, triple," Kellen said, half joking. Richard poured him a glass of whiskey. "I need eyes on Chase Holloway. He's alive, dangerous, and he's coming for my daughter." Kellen's expression turned serious. "You're sure he's alive?" Richard handed him a photo, the text Eliza had received, the timestamp, the trace report. "He's not just alive, he's nearby." Kellen studied the photo for a moment, then nodded. "All right, give me 48 hours. As he left, Eliza was coming down the stairs. Their eyes met briefly. "Who is he?" she asked. Richard hesitated. "Someone who specializes in cleaning up messes no one else can handle." Eliza frowned. "What kind of mess, Dad?" He looked at her gravely. "The kind that bleeds." That night, rain poured over the city. Kellen moved like a shadow through the docks, checking the warehouse where Chase's abandoned car had been found. Inside, everything smelled of smoke and salt. He crouched near the floor, running his fingers over a patch of soot. Then he saw it, a footprint, fresh, leading toward a broken side door. Outside, a boat engine hummed softly in the darkness. Kellen raised his binoculars. A figure stood on the deck of a small yacht, face partially hidden under a hood. Even from a distance, Kellen recognized him. Chase Holloway. He lifted his phone and dialed Richard. "You were right. He's alive. Dock 12, Pier South." "Don't engage," Richard ordered. "Just confirm and report back." But before Kellen could reply, headlights flared behind him. A black SUV screeched to a stop and two armed men jumped out. Bullets tore through the night. Kellen dove behind a stack of crates, returning fire. The yacht engine roared to life, speeding into the fog. "Kellen?" Richard's voice crackled through the phone. "Report." Kellen ducked behind cover, breathing hard. "He's got protection. Military precision. Whoever's backing him, they're not amateurs." Back at the mansion, Eliza heard the exchange over the speakerphone. Her stomach turned cold. "He's not just hiding," she said softly. "He's planning something." Richard's face darkened. "Then we'll be ready." Kellen's voice came through again. "You'd better move fast. If Holloway's not running, it means he's hunting." As the line went dead, thunder rolled across the city. Eliza stood frozen, staring into the storm outside the window. Bold cliffhanger. And somewhere beyond the waves, on a boat cutting through the fog, Chase Holloway whispered into a satellite phone. "She took my empire. Now I'll take her father." The storm had passed, but tension clung to the air like humidity before lightning. Richard Monroe hadn't slept in 2 days. Every security camera, every motion sensor in the estate flickered across the monitors in his study. He could feel it. Chase Holloway was close. Too close. Evelyn entered quietly with coffee. Kellen's last report came in. He tracked one of Holloway's men buying weapons on the black market. "They're building something." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Building what?" "A plan," Evelyn said simply. Upstairs, Eliza tried to keep herself busy. She painted in the sunroom, a habit her mother had taught her when she was a child. But no matter how bright the colors, her brush always ended up painting shadows. When she looked down at her hands, she realized they were trembling. The piece she'd tried to rebuild was unraveling. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Her heart skipped a beat. She opened it slowly, expecting another threat. But it wasn't a message, it was a video. She pressed play. The image was blurry at first, then sharpened. A camera pointed at her father's car outside the estate gate. A man's voice, Chase's voice, spoke from behind the lens. "Tick-tock, Eliza. Every empire falls eventually. You can't hide behind your daddy forever." The video ended with a single frame, a white rose taped to the car's windshield. Her body went cold. "Dad!" she screamed, running down the hall. Richard appeared instantly, Kellen right behind him. She handed him the phone, her voice shaking. "He's watching us again." Kellen examined the footage. "It's new, less than an hour old." Richard's jaw tightened. "He's escalating. He wants us scared before he moves." But Kellen wasn't convinced. "No, this isn't intimidation, it's strategy. He's testing your security." Evelyn, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "We can't keep waiting for him to strike. We hit first." Richard looked at her. "What are you suggesting?" "Bait," she said simply. "Use what he wants most, Eliza. Make him come to us." Eliza's eyes widened. "You want to use me as bait?" "It's dangerous," Richard warned. "I don't care," Eliza said, her voice steady. "I'm done hiding. I survived him once, I'll survive him again." Richard saw the fire in her eyes and reluctantly nodded. "If we do this, we do it my way. Controlled. Safe." That night, the plan was set. A decoy event. A charity fundraiser in the city under Eliza's name. Invitations went out publicly, a clear lure for anyone watching. Security teams filled the building discreetly. Kellen positioned himself on the rooftop across the street, earpiece in place. As guests arrived, cameras flashed. Eliza stood poised in a navy gown, smiling for the crowd, though her heart pounded beneath the fabric. Richard watched from the control room, eyes fixed on every monitor. Then, in the middle of the event, one camera feed flickered, just for a second. Then another. then 3. "Kellen?" Richard barked through the radio. "I see it," Kellen replied. "He's here." On the mezzanine above, a man in a waiter's uniform slipped through the shadows, moving toward Eliza. He stopped 5 feet away, a tray trembling slightly in his hand. Their eyes met, and for the briefest moment she thought she recognized him. Then he smiled. A cruel, familiar smile. "Eliza," he whispered, setting down the tray. "Did you miss me?" The guards moved instantly, but Chase was faster. He shoved the tray into one of them, drawing a knife from his sleeve. Panic erupted. Guests screamed. Kellen sprinted from the rooftop, shouting into his comm, "He's got her! Move now!" Bold cliffhanger. And as chaos engulfed the ballroom, Chase's voice cut through the screams. "You took my child, Eliza. Now I'll take everything you love." The ballroom had erupted into chaos. Screams echoed off marble walls as guests scrambled for cover. Wine glasses shattered, chandeliers swung violently above, and Chase Holloway stood in the center of it all, knife gleaming in his hand, eyes wild with rage. Eliza backed away slowly, her breath ragged, heart hammering in her chest. The sound of her own pulse drowned out everything. "You shouldn't be alive," she whispered. Chase grinned, blood already dripping from a shallow cut on his cheek. "Neither should you." Guards rushed him, but he moved like a predator. One slash, one strike, every motion precise. He grabbed Eliza's arm and pulled her close, the blade grazing her skin. "You took my empire," he hissed. "Now I'll make you watch me burn yours." From the upper balcony, Kellen drew his pistol. "Let her go, Holloway," Chase sneered. "You shoot me, and the whole world sees her blood on your hands." Eliza struggled, kicking free for a moment, knocking the knife from his grip. It clattered across the floor. Kellen fired. One clean shot that shattered the champagne tower behind Chase. Glass rained down like diamonds as chaos swallowed the room. "Move!" Richard's voice barked through the comms. His men swarmed in, forcing the guests toward the exits. Evelyn appeared from the side corridor, shouting, "This way!" But Chase wasn't finished. He lunged toward Eliza again, grabbing a shard of glass. "You think this ends tonight?" he growled. "It never ends, Eliza." She stared into his eyes and for a split second saw the man she once loved, then remembered the bruises, the screams, the loss. "Yes," she said softly. "It does." She swung the metal tray beside her, striking him across the face. The impact sent him sprawling onto the floor. Kellen rushed forward, pinning him down while 2 guards restrained him. The knife skidded across the floor and landed near Richard's feet as he entered. The music had stopped. The only sound was Chase's ragged breathing. Blood trickled from his temple, but his smile never faded. "You think you've won?" he rasped. "You have no idea who I work for." Richard's eyes darkened. "You're finished, Holloway. You'll spend the rest of your life behind bars." Chase laughed, a broken, eerie sound. "You think I built my empire alone? There are others, bigger than me. And they're already coming." Kellen pressed the muzzle of his gun against Chase's head. "Name them." But Chase only smirked. Too late. Before anyone could react, he slammed his head backward against the floor, hard enough to draw blood, and bit down, a tiny capsule hidden in his molar. Within seconds, foam bubbled at his lips. His body convulsed violently. "Poison," Evelyn shouted. "He's taking something." Eliza fell to her knees beside him. "No, no," Richard pulled her back. "Don't touch him." Chase's eyes rolled back, his last breath leaving as a gurgle. For a long moment, no one moved. The world seemed frozen. Then, slowly, the life drained from his face. Eliza stared down at the man who had destroyed her life, who had taken her child, and for the first time she felt nothing. No hatred, no satisfaction, just silence. The police arrived minutes later, the ballroom still covered in glass and blood. Reporters swarmed outside. Kellen looked at Richard grimly. "It's over." Richard shook his head. "No, it's not. You heard him. There are others." Eliza rose slowly, her voice calm but certain. "Then we find them. All of them." Bold cliffhanger. And as Chase's lifeless body was carried away, a phone buzzed in his pocket, an encrypted message flashing one line, "Phase 2, Target Monroe." The ballroom was still soaked in chaos, hours after Chase Holloway's death. Police sirens wailed outside as reporters screamed for statements, flashes of cameras cutting through the night like lightning. Inside, Eliza sat wrapped in a blanket, staring at the floor. She should have felt relief, but instead she felt a deep, unshakable dread. Evelyn handed Richard a phone, sealed in a clear evidence bag. "It was in Holloway's pocket," she said quietly. There's a message that came in after he died. Richard frowned. The screen flickered with encrypted text. Only one sentence glowed red across the display. Phase 2, Target Monroe. Kellen leaned closer. That means there's a second operation. Someone else is pulling the strings. Richard's expression hardened. Then we smoke them out before they make a move. Outside, police lights painted the snow red and blue. The detective in charge, a sharp-eyed woman named Detective Rivera, approached Richard. Mr. Monroe, we need your official statement. Holloway's death looks self-inflicted, but that message. It means we're dealing with something bigger, Richard cut in. Handle your investigation. We'll handle ours. Rivera frowned. This isn't a private war, Mr. Monroe. Richard's voice was low, dangerous. It became one the moment he laid a hand on my daughter. She studied him for a moment before sighing. Fine. But be careful. Men like him don't die alone. They take others down with them. Back at the estate, tension returned like a shadow that refused to leave. The team analyzed every piece of Holloway's digital trail. Evelyn sat at the main console, decoding files from his encrypted server. There's something here, she murmured. A list of offshore accounts, shell companies, most of them dead ends. But look at this name. She zoomed in. Eliza read it aloud. Vanguard Solutions? Kellen's head snapped up. That's not a company. It's a private security network. Ex-military, high clearance, dirty contracts. If they're involved, we've got a problem. Richard's jaw tightened. How deep? Kellen exhaled. Deep enough to disappear governments. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Richard straightened. We bring the fight to them. Evelyn, track any movement connected to Vanguard. Kellen, get me names. Eliza, still sitting by the fire, spoke softly. Dad? Maybe we should stop. Chase is dead. Isn't that enough? Richard turned to her, his expression filled with something between love and fury. Enough? He tried to kill you, Eliza, and now someone else wants to finish what he started. She met his gaze, tears threatening to fall. But if you keep fighting them, you'll become what he was, a man who only knows how to destroy. For a moment, her words broke through the steel in his eyes. I'm doing this to protect you, he said quietly. I don't want revenge anymore, she whispered. I just want peace. Before Richard could answer, alarms blared through the mansion. Red lights flashed across the monitors. Evelyn's fingers flew across the keyboard. Motion sensors triggered. Eastgate perimeter. Kellen grabbed his gun. They've found us. Security feeds showed black SUVs approaching through the forest road. Armed men dressed in tactical gear poured out, moving with military precision. Richard turned to his daughter. Get her to the panic room, now. Kellen pulled Eliza by the arm. Go. She looked back just as Richard opened a drawer and retrieved an old revolver. His voice was calm, steady. They want a war, he murmured. They just got one. Outside, thunder rumbled again as the first shots rang out, echoing through the cold night. Bold cliffhanger. And as the gunfire drew closer, one masked soldier lifted his visor, revealing a face Eliza knew all too well. Vanessa, she gasped, you? Snow fell in heavy flakes as the Monroe estate erupted in chaos. Gunfire cracked through the night, echoing off the stone walls. Floodlights swept across the property as security forces returned fire from the balconies. Inside, Eliza's pulse thundered in her ears as Kellen pulled her down a hallway toward the hidden panic room beneath the study. Keep your head down, he barked, gripping her hand tightly. Behind them, Evelyn's voice came through the earpiece, tense but focused. We've lost the north cameras. They've breached the perimeter. Eliza turned, just in time to see one of the masked soldiers step into view, tall, agile, eyes burning with something more than anger. And then, as a bullet shattered the window beside them, the soldier ripped off her mask. It was Vanessa. Eliza froze. You. Vanessa smirked, lowering her weapon slightly. Miss me, sweetheart? Kellen aimed his gun, fury flashing across his face. Drop it. But Vanessa only laughed. Relax, soldier, I'm not here for her. She pointed toward the east wing. I'm here for him, Richard Monroe. Eliza's breath caught. You're working with Vanguard? Vanessa's eyes gleamed. Oh, darling, I'm not working with them. I am them. Kellen moved closer, his voice sharp. You were Holloway's pawn. She smiled coldly. No, I was his partner. Chase wanted power. I wanted control. His death was inconvenient but not unexpected. Richard's voice suddenly came through Kellen's comm. Get Eliza out, now. But before they could move, Vanessa pulled the trigger. The bullet struck the wall inches from Eliza's head. No one leaves until I get what I came for, she hissed. Richard burst into the corridor, revolver in hand. Looking for me? He said coolly. Vanessa turned slowly, her grin widening. There you are, old man, the legend himself. I don't deal with traitors, Richard said. You should, she replied. Because one of them built your empire. Vanguard didn't just appear, Richard. You created us. His expression didn't change, but Eliza saw it, the flicker of guilt. Vanessa took a step forward. 20 years ago, your company funded private operations overseas. Vanguard was your shadow. When you walked away, we didn't die. We evolved, and now we own everything you left behind. Richard's jaw tightened. And Holloway? Was our puppet, Vanessa said simply. The perfect distraction. While you were busy mourning your daughter's tragedy, we were moving in on your assets. Kellen fired first. The bullet grazed Vanessa's shoulder, sending her stumbling. Richard grabbed Eliza, pulling her toward the staircase. Move! But Vanessa's laughter echoed through the hall, chilling and triumphant. Run all you want, Richard. You can't outrun your own sins. They reached the panic room door, Evelyn already inside, working on the control panel. 10 seconds to lock, she shouted. Richard shoved Eliza through. Go! But before he could follow, Vanessa appeared again, blood seeping through her sleeve. She raised her gun, aiming squarely at him. Goodbye, Monroe. Kellen dove between them, taking the shot. The bullet hit his shoulder, and he went down with a groan. Richard spun and fired back. Once, twice. Vanessa staggered, clutching her side, her weapon falling from her grasp. Evelyn slammed the panic room door shut, just as another explosion rocked the estate. Dust rained from the ceiling. Alarms wailed. Eliza knelt beside Kellen, pressing her hand to his wound. Stay with me. He grimaced through the pain. You're stronger than you think. Outside, through the shattered windows, Vanessa's voice rang out faintly over the smoke and chaos. You can't hide forever, Eliza. Your father's past belongs to me now. Bold cliffhanger. And as the flames spread through the estate, Evelyn whispered the words that made Eliza's blood run cold. She's right. Vanguard was your father's creation. The panic room door sealed with a heavy metallic thud. The world above them burned. Smoke drifted through the air vents, and the rumble of distant gunfire shook the floor. Eliza crouched beside Kellen, her hands stained with his blood. You're losing too much, she whispered, pressing harder on his wound. Kellen gritted his teeth. I've had worse. He tried to smile, but his face was pale. Evelyn worked frantically at the control console, pulling up surveillance feeds. The main floor's gone, she muttered. Half the security team's down. Vanessa's regrouping outside with Vanguard forces. We've got maybe 15 minutes before they breach again. Eliza turned to her father. Tell me what she meant, Dad. About Vanguard. About you. Richard stood in the center of the room, silent, the glow of emergency lights casting deep shadows across his face. Now's not the time, he said quietly. Yes, it is, Eliza's voice cracked. You've been hiding things since this started. You knew about her. You knew about all of it. He met her gaze, eyes filled with the kind of pain that only comes from decades of guilt. When I built Monroe Global, we were expanding into defense contracts. Vanguard was supposed to be a small private arm, just intelligence work, security detail, nothing more. But power breeds monsters. They became something darker. When your mother found out, she begged me to shut it down. I didn't, and that decision destroyed everything. Eliza shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. So this entire nightmare is because of you? Richard's jaw tightened. Yes, because of me. Kellen coughed weakly. We can argue about blame later. Right now, we need a way out. Evelyn turned from the screens. We can't escape by road. They've blocked every route. But there's a maintenance tunnel beneath the east wing. It leads to the old train line. Richard nodded. Good. We'll move in 5 minutes. Eliza stood, still trembling. And then what? Run for the rest of our lives? He stepped closer, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. No, we end it. This doesn't stop until Vanguard is gone. Kellen forced himself upright, blood still seeping through his shirt. You'll need evidence, real proof they exist. Evelyn nodded. There's a master server at Vanguard headquarters. Every contract, every operation, every name is archived there. Where? Richard demanded. New York, she said. Lower Manhattan, under the guise of a tech firm called VTech Global. Eliza took a shaky breath. Then that's where we go. Before anyone could respond, the monitors flickered. Vanessa appeared on the screen, bloodied but smirking. You can't hide forever, Richard. You built this kingdom of lies, and now I'm taking the throne. Enjoy your little hole in the ground while it lasts. The feed cut to black. A timer flashed on the corner of the screen. Evelyn's voice dropped. She set charges in the foundation. The whole estate's rigged to blow. Richard grabbed Eliza's hand. Move. They helped Kellen to his feet and fled through the narrow escape tunnel as the timer ticked down. The air was thick with dust and heat, the sound of crumbling stone echoing behind them. Eliza glanced back once, seeing the home that had been both her prison and her sanctuary engulfed in flames. Her father's empire, his guilt, reduced to ash. When they finally emerged into the freezing night, the explosion hit. The ground trembled. Fire lit the sky. Eliza turned to her father, voice trembling. She won't stop, will she? Richard stared into the inferno, his expression unreadable. No, he said quietly. Because she's still playing my game. Bold cliffhanger. And as the smoke rose behind them, a message pinged on Evelyn's tablet, a live GPS signal from New York. Vanessa was already waiting. The skyline of New York City glimmered like a field of broken glass as the black SUV sped through the night. Inside, tension filled the air. Richard sat in the front seat, silent, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Beside him, Evelyn scrolled through encrypted files on her tablet, tracking the faint GPS signal that pulsed on the screen, Vanessa's trail. In the back seat, Eliza sat next to Kellen, who was pale but conscious. His arm was in a makeshift sling, his jaw tight with pain. You shouldn't have come, she said softly. He gave her a weak grin. And missed the grand finale? Not a chance. She almost smiled. Almost. But then her gaze fell on the distant skyline, and the weight of what lay ahead sank in. This was it. The end of her father's empire. The end of the nightmare. Or both. Evelyn's voice cut through the silence. We've confirmed the signal. Vanessa's at VTech Global. She's not hiding anymore. Richard's eyes hardened. Then she wants us to come. Kellen nodded. A trap. Guaranteed. Let her think it's working, Richard said. This time, she underestimates the wrong people. They parked several blocks away from the towering glass structure that served as VTech Global's headquarters. It was nearly midnight, but the lights were still on, humming with artificial life. The company's logo, a sharp V inside a circle, glowed like a beacon above the entrance. From the shadows, Eliza studied the building. How do we get in? Evelyn pulled a small device from her coat pocket. Through the service tunnel. I used to handle Monroe Global's tech partnerships. Some habits die hard. Kellen smirked. And here I thought I was the criminal. They entered through a maintenance hatch beneath the loading dock. The tunnel was narrow, lined with cables and humming machinery. Every step echoed like a heartbeat. Richard led the way, flashlight cutting through the dark. Once we reached the main server room, we copy everything. Names, accounts, operations. Once it's out in the open, Vanguard dies. But when they reached the lower corridor, something felt wrong. Too quiet. Too clean. Kellen held up his hand. Wait. He crouched near the wall, spotting a thin wire across the floor. Trip sensor. They knew we'd come. Evelyn's face went pale. They're watching. Before anyone could move, lights blazed overhead. Speakers crackled. Then Vanessa's voice filled the air, smooth and venomous. Welcome home, Richard. You brought the family. How touching. Richard looked up toward the ceiling cameras. End this, Vanessa. You've lost. Her laughter echoed through the hallway. Lost? You're standing in my server room. You're in the heart of Vanguard. Every file, every secret, it all belongs to me now, including you. Doors slammed shut behind them, locking into place with heavy bolts. Eliza's pulse raced. She's trapping us in. Vanessa appeared on a large monitor at the end of the hall, her face half lit, eyes cold. You destroyed my partner, my empire, my future, so I took something of yours. Guess what? Evelyn's tablet buzzed. A live feed opened, camera footage of a small private jet, engines roaring to life on a nearby runway. The pilot's face turned toward the camera. Richard froze. That's your driver, Vanessa said sweetly. And on that plane are your company's last surviving records. Everything you've built, every asset about to vanish. Richard clenched his fists. You won't get away with this. Vanessa smiled. Oh, I already have. Suddenly the monitors flickered, and Evelyn gasped. She's overriding the building's security grid. She's going to blow the data vault. Kellen grabbed Eliza's arm. Move. We have to get to the server room now. They sprinted down the hallway as alarms blared, red lights flashing overhead. The floor trembled. The building was about to detonate. Eliza looked back at the screen, Vanessa's smirking face frozen on the monitor. "You want to play God?" she shouted. "Then burn with your kingdom." Bold cliffhanger. And as the first explosion rocked the floor beneath them, the doors to the server vault burst open, revealing Vanessa herself alive, armed, and waiting. The skyline of New York City glimmered like a field of broken glass as the black SUV sped through the night. Inside, tension filled the air. Richard sat in the front seat, silent, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Beside him, Evelyn scrolled through encrypted files on her tablet, tracking the faint GPS signal that pulsed on the screen, Vanessa's trail. In the back seat, Eliza sat next to Kellen, who was pale but conscious. His arm was in a makeshift sling, his jaw tight with pain. "You shouldn't have come," she said softly. He gave her a weak grin. "And missed the grand finale? Not a chance." She almost smiled, almost. But then her gaze fell on the distant skyline, and the weight of what lay ahead sank in. This was it, the end of her father's empire. The end of the nightmare, or both. Evelyn's voice cut through the silence. "We've confirmed the signal. Vanessa's at VTech Global. She's not hiding anymore." Richard's eyes hardened. "Then she wants us to come." Kellen nodded. "A trap, guaranteed." "Let her think it's working," Richard said. "This time she underestimates the wrong people." They parked several blocks away from the towering glass structure that served as VTech Global's headquarters. It was nearly midnight, but the lights were still on, humming with artificial life. The company's logo, a sharp V inside a circle, glowed like a beacon above the entrance. From the shadows, Eliza studied the building. "How do we get in?" Evelyn pulled a small device from her coat pocket. "Through the service tunnel. I used to handle Monroe Global's tech partnerships. Some habits die hard." Kellen smirked. "And here I thought I was the criminal." They entered through a maintenance hatch beneath the loading dock. The tunnel was narrow, lined with cables and humming machinery. Every step echoed like a heartbeat. Richard led the way, flashlight cutting through the dark. "Once we reach the main server room, we copy everything. Names, accounts, operations. Once it's out in the open, Vanguard dies." But when they reached the lower corridor, something felt wrong. Too quiet, too clean. Kellen held up his hand. "Wait." He crouched near the wall, spotting a thin wire across the floor. "Trip sensor." They knew he'd come. Evelyn's face went pale. "They're watching." Before anyone could move, lights blazed overhead. Speakers crackled. Then Vanessa's voice filled the air, smooth and venomous. "Welcome home, Richard. You brought the family. How touching." Richard looked up toward the ceiling cameras. "End this, Vanessa. You've lost." Her laughter echoed through the hallway. "Lost? You're standing in my server room. You're in the heart of Vanguard. Every file, every secret, it all belongs to me now, including you." Doors slammed shut behind them, locking into place with heavy bolts. Eliza's pulse raced. "She's trapping us in." Vanessa appeared on a large monitor at the end of the hall, her face half-lit, eyes cold. "You destroyed my partner, my empire, my future. So I took something of yours. Guess what?" Evelyn's tablet buzzed. A live feed opened, camera footage of a small private jet, engines roaring to life on a nearby runway. The pilot's face turned toward the camera. Richard froze. "That's your driver," Vanessa said sweetly. "And on that plane are your company's last surviving records. Everything you've built, every asset about to vanish." Richard clenched his fists. "You won't get away with this," Vanessa smiled. "Oh, I already have." Suddenly, the monitors flickered, and Evelyn gasped. "She's overriding the building's security grid. She's going to blow the data vault." Kellen grabbed Eliza's arm. "Move. We have to get to the server room now." They sprinted down the hallway as alarms blared, red lights flashing overhead. The floor trembled. The building was about to detonate. Eliza looked back at the screen, Vanessa's smirking face frozen on the monitor. "You want to play God?" she shouted. "Then burn with your kingdom." Bold cliffhanger. And as the first explosion rocked the floor beneath them, the doors to the server vault burst open, revealing Vanessa herself, alive, armed, and waiting. The server vault opened into a low, humming chamber lined with racks of glowing hardware. Red emergency lights painted long shadows across polished floor tiles. Vanessa stood at the center, rifle cradled, breath steady, eyes like twin coals. Behind her, the control panel flashed a countdown. 0:42 seconds. Eliza hit the floor, sliding low, Kellen dragging her toward the server stacks. "Find everything," he snapped. "Copy and burn it to every channel we can." Evelyn was already typing, palms moving like trained birds, ripping encrypted files apart, diverting them through multiple circuits. Richard planted his shoulder against a rack, bracing for impact, watching Vanessa like a ruler measuring a threat. She smiled, a slow, patient thing. "You think you can steal my prize?" she purred. "It's already mine." Eliza crawled between the stacks, hand shaking as she plugged a drive into the main terminal. Lines of code scrolled her screen like rain. Evelyn shouted, "We're in, but they have active wipes. Mirror copies are failing." Vanessa's rifle clicked forward. "Stop," she said, voice flat. "Walk away. Let me take what's mine." Kellen rose, flinching through pain, and faced her. "You weaponize names. People die." Vanessa blinked, almost hurt, as if his morality surprised her. "They were instruments," she answered. "Tools in an economy of power. This is repair." Richard stepped forward, voice low but clear. "Release the building, Vanessa. You've taken enough lives." She laughed, bright and mad. "You built the machine, Richard. Don't act surprised when the gears turn." The countdown ticked, louder now, echoing in the room. Evelyn cursed. 40 seconds. Kellen lunged, grabbing for Vanessa's arm, trying to snatch the rifle. Metal clanged, a struggle that smelled of salt and fear. Vanessa twisted, firing a warning shot that shattered a rack overhead. Sparks rained down. For a heartbeat, the room was a storm of noise. Then Richard moved, faster than anyone expected, smashing into Vanessa, wrenching the rifle sideways. The barrel discharged harmlessly into a bank of cooling fans. Evelyn cried, "Copy finally complete. We have it. Every ledger, every name." Eliza sobbed, relief sharp as winter air. Vanessa writhed, pinned beneath Richard's weight, blood darkening her sleeve. "You think this ends with files?" she spat. "You don't know what I could call." Kellen dragged a nearby cuff and snapped it around her wrist. "Not today." Sirens wailed near. Through the broken glass, the skyline glowed as dawn threatened. The servers hummed, their secrets now public, pushed out to feeds and inboxes across the world. Vanessa glowered, exhausted and furious. "You exposed me," she hissed. "Good. I wanted to be seen." Richard held her gaze without mercy. "You will be judged." Her laughter broke ragged. "Maybe, or maybe you will be." The police burst in, tactical teams sweeping the room. Detective Rivera pushed forward, eyes hard. "Hands up, everyone." Guards moved, guns trained. Evelyn handed a duplicate drive to Rivera. "Everything," she said. "All of it. Names, transactions, the server logs." Rivera took it, stunned. "This will topple them," she breathed. Vanessa spat bile, but her face had lost its defiance. Kellen staggered, pressing his wound, but managed a dry smile. "We did it," he muttered. Eliza sank to her knees, exhaustion flooding in. Richard knelt beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. "You were brave," he said. She looked up, eyes raw, and whispered, "We survived." Radar in the distance signaled the approaching media swarm. The truth, now uncorked, would not be contained. And as Vanessa was led away, cuffed and defeated, her voice rose once more, echoing down the server aisle, "Watch." The morning after the raid, New York City awoke to chaos of a different kind. Not bullets, not fire, but truth. Screens across the country lit up with breaking news banners. Vanguard exposed, corporate espionage network tied to billionaire deaths. Every major channel replayed the same images. Vanessa in handcuffs, the server room in ruins, and Eliza Monroe standing among the wreckage, alive. For the first time in years, she wasn't a victim or a whisper of scandal. She was a survivor. The woman who had brought down an empire. Inside a quiet hospital room, Kellen lay on a bed, his arm bandaged, IV running slow. When Eliza entered, his smile was weak but real. "You look better without the smoke and bullets," he teased. She chuckled softly. "You look worse without your gun." He laughed, then winced in pain. "I'll take that as a compliment." They sat in silence for a moment, the air between them filled with exhaustion and relief. Finally he said, "You did it, you know. You finished what he started." Eliza looked out the window at the city skyline. "No," she said quietly. "I ended what they started. My father, my husband, Vanessa. They all built their power on secrets. I'm done living in them." Down the hall, reporters waited outside a press conference room where Richard Monroe was preparing to speak. Evelyn adjusted his tie, whispering, "Are you sure about this?" Richard nodded. "For the first time in my life, yes." He stepped up to the podium as cameras flashed. His voice, Usually commanding, was softer now, remorseful. For years, I built a legacy on control. I told myself it was for my family, for my daughter. But power without conscience destroys more than it protects. I let that happen. He paused, meeting the crowd's gaze. My daughter Eliza showed me what courage really looks like. She faced monsters that I helped create, and she survived them. The truth matters more than my name, my company, or my past. So today, I resign, and I give everything I have left to a new foundation, for women who've lived through violence and for those still fighting to be heard. The room fell silent. Then applause rose, slow, hesitant at first, then thunderous. Reporters shouted questions, but Richard simply stepped back and left the stage. Later that evening, he found Eliza standing by the East River. The sunset bled gold across the water, wind tugging at her hair. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I did." He replied, "It's the only way I could begin to make peace." She looked at him, not as a broken man, but as her father. "Then maybe now," she whispered, "we both get to live again." Behind them, Evelyn approached with a small envelope. "This came from Detective Rivera," she said. "They found something in Vanessa's cell." Eliza opened it. Inside was a single note written in sharp, familiar handwriting. "You may have won, Eliza, but every empire leaves shadows." Her fingers tightened around the paper, but she smiled faintly. "Then let the shadows come. I'm not afraid anymore." The wind picked up, carrying her words into the city that had watched her suffer and now watched her rise. For once, she felt free. Not because her enemies were gone, but because she had finally stopped being their prisoner. That night, news networks across the world replayed her father's speech. Hashtags trended. Survivors shared their own stories under her name. Eliza's face became a symbol, not of tragedy, but of endurance. In her apartment, she lit a single candle by the window, for the child she lost, for the woman she became, and for every voice that had been silenced by fear. The flame flickered, steady and bright. Bold cliffhanger, and as she turned away, her phone buzzed once. A new message, no sender listed. "We see you, Eliza. Welcome to the game. Troli vit content view king el danoi." So, that's how this story ends. Hey, my wonderful friends, you're still here, aren't you? If you've made it all the way to this moment, then something in Eliza's journey has probably touched your heart in a quiet, powerful way. Maybe it reminded you that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about learning how to rebuild. Eliza's pain, her father's guilt, and their fight for truth remind us of one thing the Stoics have always taught. We can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we rise after it. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The obstacle is the way." Every wound, every betrayal, every loss, they are not the end. They are the doorway to becoming someone stronger, freer, and more alive. So if life has ever broken you, don't hide your scars. Heal through them. Turn your pain into purpose, just as Eliza did. And if this story made you feel something, even just a spark, then please, my friend, hit that like, share, and subscribe button. Because somewhere out there, another heart needs to hear this message too. Ava had everything a woman could dream of. A wedding, a loving fiancé, and a secret. She couldn't wait to share it. She was pregnant. This was supposed to be the happiest moment of her life, but the week before the wedding, fate had other plans. Dylan, the man she loved, had betrayed her, and her best friend, her maid of honor, was part of it. She could have walked away, but why leave when she could destroy him instead? Stay with us, because this wedding is about to become the ultimate reckoning. Ava stood in front of the mirror, running her fingers lightly over the lace of her wedding dress. The soft fabric felt delicate under her touch. The intricate floral patterns, embroidered with tiny pearls, caught the golden glow of the room's fairy lights. It was perfect, just like she had always imagined. She took a deep breath, letting the reality sink in. In less than 1 week, she would be walking down the aisle, marrying the man she loved. The thought sent a rush of warmth through her chest, making her stomach flutter. Dylan. Her Dylan. He wasn't just her fiancé. He was her best friend, her safe place, the man she had built her future around. They had been through so much together, and now they were finally reaching the moment she had dreamed of for years. She could already picture it. His smile as she walked toward him, the way his hands would feel when he took hers, the promise in his eyes as he said, "I do." She smiled to herself, placing a hand over her stomach. And soon, there will be 3 of us. The realization sent a wave of happiness through her. She had only found out 2 days ago and had kept it a secret, wanting to surprise Dylan in the most special way. She had imagined it so many times, maybe on their honeymoon, maybe the night after the wedding, curled up together in bed. He would laugh, pull her into his arms, press his forehead against hers, and whisper something like, "We're going to be parents? Really?" His voice would be soft, amazed. He always talked about wanting kids someday. This baby was proof of their love. A new beginning for them. Everything was falling into place. A knock on the door pulled her out of her thoughts. "Ava?" Brooke's voice rang through the room before she stepped inside. Her blonde hair tucked into a loose updo, wearing one of the silky robes Ava had gifted the bridal party. "Oh my God, you look stunning." Ava turned to her, beaming. "You think so? Are you kidding?" Brooke walked over, touching the delicate embroidery of the dress. "Dylan's gonna lose his mind when he sees you." Ava let out a soft laugh, feeling her cheeks warm. "I hope so." "He should," Brooke smirked. "Not every guy gets to marry someone who actually looks like a dream." Ava rolled her eyes playfully, but she couldn't hide the way her heart swelled at the thought of Dylan seeing her for the first time tomorrow. Brooke flopped onto the bed. "Are you nervous?" "A little," Ava admitted, sitting beside her. "Not about marrying Dylan, just, I don't know. The wedding itself. I guess, what if I trip walking down the aisle? What if I say something stupid?" Brooke waved her off. "Please, even if you do, Dylan will still be obsessed with you." Ava smiled, feeling reassured for a moment. They just sat there, comfortable silence settling between them. Brooke had been her best friend for years, the one who had been by her side through everything. Heartbreaks, career struggles, late-night breakdowns. She was like a sister to her. And tomorrow, she would stand beside Ava as her maid of honor. "I can't believe it's finally happening," Ava murmured, looking down at the sparkling ring on her finger. "I know." Brooke nudged her playfully. "Feels like yesterday when we were sitting in your tiny apartment, drinking wine and laughing about how none of the guys you dated were worth your time." Ava laughed at the memory. "And now look at me, marrying the man of my dreams." Brooke nodded, but something flickered across her face, too quick for Ava to catch, before she could think much of it. Brooke spoke again. "You really love him, don't you?" Ava didn't even hesitate. "With everything in me." And she meant it. Dylan wasn't perfect, but he was hers. He had always been ambitious, always focused on his career, but she had never doubted his love for her. He was charming, successful, and confident in a way that drew people in effortlessly. Sure, he could be a little distracted sometimes, and maybe he wasn't the most emotionally expressive person, but he was driven. He had built himself from the ground up, and she admired that about him. Ava knew deep down that Dylan loved her. She knew it. Didn't she? A tiny nagging thought crept into her mind, but she quickly pushed it away. Of course he did. He had proposed in the most beautiful way. A private rooftop dinner, fairy lights twinkling above them, music playing softly in the background. He had held her hands, looked into her eyes, and said all the right words. "I can't imagine my life without you. Marry me." He had made her feel special, loved, chosen. That was all that mattered. "Do you ever think about what life will be like after?" Brooke asked suddenly. Ava tilted her head. "After what?" "The wedding," Brooke said, leaning back against the pillows. "Like once the fairy tale is over, when it's just normal life again. Do you think things will change?" Ava considered that. "I mean, probably, but in a good way, right? We'll grow together, figure things out, maybe buy a house, start a family." Her hand instinctively rested on her stomach again. A second passed before Brooke reached for her hand, squeezing it lightly. "I'm happy for you, Ava," and she sounded like she meant it. The moment passed quickly, and Brooke stood up, stretching. "All right, bride-to-be, you should get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day." Ava nodded, standing with her. "Yeah, it really is." Brooke hugged her tightly before heading toward the door. Sweet dreams. As the door clicked shut behind her, Ava exhaled deeply. Turning back to the mirror, she stared at her reflection for a long moment, fingers brushing over the bodice of her dress. Tomorrow, she would become Mrs. Dylan Carter, and she had never felt more ready. Ava lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the city beyond the windows. Sleep wouldn't come. Her mind was too full. spinning with thoughts of tomorrow, of the vows she would say, of the life she was about to start. She reached for her phone on the nightstand, considering texting Dylan. But what would she even say? I can't sleep. Are you awake? It felt silly. He was probably already in bed, exhausted from all the wedding preparations. She sighed, sitting up. Maybe some fresh air would help clear her head. Slipping out of bed, she grabbed her silk robe and wrapped it around herself before stepping out of the bedroom. The apartment was dark, except for the dim glow of the city lights filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. As she padded toward the balcony, she froze. Laughter. Deep, hushed laughter, coming from Dylan's office. Her heart skipped. Was he still awake? Was he on the phone? No, the sound was too clear. Someone was in there with him. She hesitated for only a second before stepping closer. The door wasn't fully shut, just slightly ajar, just enough for her to see the warm golden glow of the desk lamp spilling into the hallway. Dylan's voice drifted out first. Man, I still can't believe I'm actually going through with this. Ava frowned, her fingers curling around the edge of the doorframe. Then, Eric's voice, Dylan's best friend. I thought you'd change your mind before now. What happened to all that talk about marriage being a cage? Dylan chuckled, the sound so casual, so relaxed. Ava's perfect for the role. Sweet, devoted, and best of all, completely clueless. Ava's stomach twisted. Eric laughed. Damn, so you're really gonna lock this down? Of course, Dylan said, and Ava could hear the smirk in his voice. I mean, she's beautiful, smart enough to keep things interesting, but not enough to question things. A trophy wife, the kind that makes me look good. Something cold and sharp lodged itself in Ava's chest. Trophy wife, completely clueless. Her breathing slowed, her pulse hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. Eric took a slow sip of his drink. And she has no idea about Brooke? Ava's entire body went cold. She stopped breathing. There was a beat of silence. Then Dylan exhaled a laugh. Please. If she ever found out, she'd break like a porcelain doll. She worships the ground I walk on. It was too easy. Ava gripped the doorframe tighter, her nails digging into the wood. Eric let out a low whistle. So how long's it been going on? Dylan swirled his whiskey, watching the ice clink against the glass. Few months. It was just supposed to be a one-time thing, you know, some drinks, some fun. But Brooke, he let out a dark chuckle. Man, she's addictive. Ava bit the inside of her cheek so hard she tasted blood. Brooke, her best friend, the woman who had just hours ago sat on her bed, smiled at her, held her hand, and told her she was happy for her. The betrayal sank in, heavy and suffocating, but Dylan wasn't done. He leaned back in his chair, stretching like this was just another casual conversation. After the wedding, I'll get Ava to sign a prenup. Make her think it's for us, something about financial security. He grinned. And when I get bored, I'll move on to someone new. Eric snorted. Damn, man, that's cold. Dylan shrugged. Marriage is just another business deal. And Ava? She's just an investment. Ava barely made it back to her room before the sobs took over. As soon as the door clicked shut behind her, her legs gave out and she collapsed onto the floor. Her back pressed against the cold wood, her hands trembling as they covered her mouth, trying to silence the gasps escaping her throat. Her body shook violently. The weight of what she had just heard was suffocating. Dylan, the man she had loved, trusted, given everything to. He had played her for a fool. And Brooke, the woman she had called her sister. Her closest confidant had been sleeping with him behind her back. Ava's hands shook as she gripped the porcelain sink. Trophy wife, completely clueless. She thought of every moment she had spent with him, every time she had laughed at his jokes, kissed him, held on to him like he was her safe place. Every time she had defended him when he came home late, brushed off his distance as stress, told herself that the love they shared was real. She thought about the night Brooke had stayed over. The time she had looked Ava in the eye and told her how lucky she was to have a man like Dylan. It felt unreal, like some cruel joke she'd wake up from at any second. But no matter how many times she begged the universe to rewind time, to take her back to before she walked past that door, nothing changed. Her stomach twisted painfully, nausea creeping up again, but this time she forced herself to swallow it down. She couldn't afford to be weak. Not now. She curled in on herself, arms wrapping protectively around her stomach. Their child. Her child. A fresh wave of emotion surged through her, Anger, fear, heartbreak, all tangled together in a suffocating knot. What kind of man did this? What kind of father could smile at her, kiss her, talk about their future, all while planning to betray her the moment she was legally bound to him? And Brooke. How many times had she sat across from Ava, sipping wine, laughing, telling her how excited she was for the wedding? How many times had she reassured Ava that Dylan loved her, that she was lucky to have him? Had she been laughing behind her back this whole time? Had she whispered to Dylan after every call, mocking her for being so naive? Ava clenched her jaw, wiping her wet cheeks with the back of her hand. She should leave. Pack a bag. Disappear before the sun even rises. She had enough money saved. She could buy a last-minute flight, vanish into a new city, raise her baby on her own. But then Dylan's voice echoed in her mind. If she ever found out, she'd break like a porcelain doll. Porcelain doll. Fragile. Weak. Breakable. Her entire body tensed. Her fingers dug into the silk of her robe. Her breathing came out slow and measured. No, she wouldn't break. She wouldn't run away like some scorned woman, crying in a hotel room in a city where no one knew her name. She wouldn't give Dylan that victory. She would give him a wedding. She would give him the perfect, beautiful, storybook ceremony. He thought he was getting everything, and then she would burn his entire world to the ground, her nails pressed into her palm hard enough to hurt. He had used her, lied to her, humiliated her. Now it was her turn. Her mind raced, working through every possibility, every move she could make. She would need help, someone who knew Dylan. Someone who wasn't already in his pocket. Only one name came to mind. Jesse. Dylan's younger brother. The only one in his family who had ever truly seen her. She swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around her phone as she scrolled through her contacts. She had never called him this late before. Never needed to. But tonight, everything was different. Her thumb hovered over his name for a second before she forced herself to press call. The line rang once, twice. Then a groggy voice answered. Ava? His tone shifted from sleepy to concerned almost instantly. What's wrong? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The lump in her throat was back, thick and suffocating. And for a moment, she thought she wouldn't be able to speak at all. Jesse must have sensed it. Hey, he said, his voice softer now. Take a breath. Talk to me. Ava squeezed her eyes shut, pressing a hand to her forehead. Her voice, when it finally came out, was barely above a whisper. I need to see you, please. There was a brief pause. Where are you? I'll be there in 10 minutes. No hesitation. No questions. Just quiet certainty. Ava pulled the phone away from her ear, staring down at the screen until the call disconnected. 10 minutes. Her hand still trembled, but this time it wasn't from grief. It was from something much colder, much sharper. She had made her decision. The cafe was nearly empty at this hour, except for a few late-night stragglers hunched over their drinks, lost in their own worlds. The air smelled of fresh coffee and something sweet, but Ava barely noticed. She sat in the corner booth, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Her leg bounced under the table. She was trying to stay calm, to breathe evenly, to keep herself together. But the moment she saw Jesse walk through the door, everything inside her cracked. Just a little. He looked like he had thrown on whatever clothes he could find. Dark jeans, a plain t-shirt, a hoodie pulled over his head. His hair was slightly disheveled, and there was sleep still clinging to his face. But the second his eyes found hers, all of that faded. Ava had always thought Jesse and Dylan were nothing alike. Despite being brothers, where Dylan was polished, sharp-edged, always calculated, Jesse had a different kind of presence. Steady, calm, like a storm that hadn't decided if it wanted to rage or not. Right now, he looked like he was teetering on the edge. He slid into the booth across from her, his gaze scanning her face, taking in her red-rimmed eyes, the way her fingers trembled slightly as she put her cup down. Tell me everything, he said, voice low but firm. Ava swallowed. She hadn't allowed herself to cry since locking herself in her room earlier. She had told herself she wouldn't let another tear fall for Dylan Carter. But now, sitting across from Jesse, someone who actually cared, who wasn't feeding her lies, something inside her wavered. She exhaled shakily, gripping the edge of the table as she forced the words out. I heard him, she whispered. Dylan, talking to Eric. Jesse's jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists on the table. Ava felt her throat tighten. He doesn't love me, she said quietly. He never did. I was just a trophy to him, a way to boost his image. She looked down, her voice cracking. And Brooke? She let out a bitter, shaky laugh. It's been her this whole time, my best friend. He bragged about it like it was some kind of joke. Jessie's expression darkened. Ava's fingers dug into her palms, her nails pressing into her skin. And after the wedding, her voice lowered. He planned to make me sign a prenup. Then, when he got bored, he was going to leave me. Jessie sucked in a sharp breath, leaning back in his seat. His fists clenched and unclenched like he was struggling to keep himself from punching something. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight with restrained anger. I always knew Dylan was a selfish jerk, he muttered, shaking his head. But this is something else. He exhaled slowly, trying to level his breathing. And Brooke? Are you sure? Ava let out a hollow laugh. Oh, he made it pretty damn clear. Apparently, she's addictive. The word tasted sour in her mouth. Jessie muttered something under his breath, something she didn't quite catch, but it sounded like a curse. He looked away for a second, running a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. Then, when his eyes met hers again, his expression softened just slightly. What are you gonna do? He asked quietly. Ava inhaled deeply. I thought about running, just leaving before the wedding, disappearing. Jessie studied her. But then I thought about how he sees me, she said, her voice steadier now. A porcelain doll, something fragile, something breakable. He thinks I'll shatter the second I find out the truth. Jessie's jaw twitched. Ava sat up straighter, the fire inside her burning stronger. I'm not running, Jessie. I'm not letting him win. I want to make him pay. I want him to feel what it's like to have his whole world collapse right in front of him. A slow, dark smirk tugged at the corner of Jessie's lips, but his eyes remained serious. So, you want revenge? Ava didn't hesitate. Yes. Jessie nodded, tapping his fingers against the table as he processed her words. He didn't try to talk her out of it. He didn't feed her some nonsense about how it wasn't worth it, how she should be the bigger person. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his arms on the table, voice low. Then let's make it count. Ava blinked. You're helping me? Jessie's expression hardened. Of course I am. You think I'm going to let him get away with this? He scoffed. He spent his whole life stepping on people, thinking he's untouchable, but not this time. A strange mix of relief and gratitude filled Ava's chest. She hadn't realized just how badly she needed someone to believe in her, to believe that she wasn't crazy for wanting to destroy the man who had destroyed her first. Jessie cracked his knuckles, his eyes sharp with determination. Tell me what you're thinking. Ava took a deep breath. We let him believe nothing is wrong, she said. I act hurt but forgiving, like a woman who loves him too much to walk away. I let him think I'm still under his spell. Jessie nodded. And while he's busy being a smug bastard, I'll get the evidence, messages, photos, whatever proof I can find. We make sure there's no way he can talk his way out of it. Ava met his gaze, her heart pounding. And then, on the wedding day, we expose him in front of everyone. Jessie leaned back slightly, a slow grin forming. Now that sounds like a plan. Ava exhaled, her fingers finally unclenching. For the first time since hearing Dylan's voice through that door, she felt something other than pain. She felt powerful. Jessie reached for his coffee, taking a sip before setting it down with a smirk. This is going to be fun. Ava watched him, something shifting inside her. She had always liked Jessie, but she had never seen him like this before. Focused, unwavering, standing firmly by her side. Dylan had underestimated her, and that would be his greatest mistake. Ava woke up the next morning feeling different. Not lighter, not at peace, but controlled. Every part of her felt like it had been stitched together overnight, carefully pieced into something steady, something unshakable. The hurt was still there, buried deep, but she refused to let it show. Not yet. Ava turned in bed, staring at the empty space beside her. Dylan had stayed at his bachelor party last night, or so he claimed. Before, she might have believed him without a second thought. She would have pictured him surrounded by his friends, laughing, drinking, counting down the hours until she became his wife. Now she knew better. She took a slow breath before forcing herself up. She had a role to play. By the time Dylan finally came home that afternoon, Ava was in the kitchen, carefully arranging a charcuterie board for the two of them. She could hear his footsteps as he entered, his confident stride carrying him straight toward her. "Hey, beautiful," he said, sliding an arm around her waist from behind, pressing a kiss to the side of her neck. Ava stilled for a fraction of a second before tilting her head and offering him a small smile. "Hey," she said softly, as if she had been waiting for him all day. Dylan grinned, squeezing her hip. "Miss me?" Her stomach turned, but she let out a quiet laugh, leaning into him just enough to make it convincing. "Of course. Did you have fun last night?" Dylan walked over to the fridge, grabbing a bottle of water. "Yeah, it was wild. Eric got so drunk I thought we were going to have to carry him home." Ava nodded, turning back to the board, carefully slicing a wedge of cheese. Her hands were steady. "Sounds like a good time." Dylan twisted the cap off his bottle and took a sip, watching her. "You okay?" Ava blinked, glancing up. "What do you mean?" Dylan studied her for a moment, like he was trying to read something on her face. "I don't know. You seem different." Ava's lips curled into a small smile. "I'm getting married tomorrow. Pretty sure that's enough to make any woman act a little different." Dylan chuckled, walking up behind her again, his hands sliding up her arms. "Cold feet?" She turned in his hold, looking up at him. Her expression was soft, almost shy. "Maybe a little. Not about you, just everything. The wedding, the guests, the attention. It's a lot." Dylan relaxed instantly, his grip on her loosening as he smirked. "Babe, you're going to be fine. The second you walk down that aisle, none of that other stuff is going to matter." Ava exhaled, nodding, like he had just said the exact thing she needed to hear. "You're right." Dylan leaned in, kissing her forehead. "Always am." Ava forced herself to melt into the touch, to let her body relax against him. It was a game of control now, and she refused to lose. The days leading up to the wedding were nothing short of a carefully choreographed performance. Ava played her role flawlessly, smiling when Dylan touched her, laughing at his jokes, pretending to be the love-struck fiancée she had once been. But beneath it all, Ava's mind was sharp, focused. He bought it at first. But Dylan was sharp, and as much as he loved thinking he had her wrapped around his finger, he wasn't stupid. By the second day, the shift in his behavior was subtle. Longer glances when he thought she wasn't looking, his arm lingering around her waist just a second too long, his voice slightly more careful when he spoke. "You're really quiet," he said suddenly. Ava glanced up, feigning confusion. Dylan's eyes were on her now, his expression unreadable. "You've been different these past couple of days." Ava smiled, closing the magazine. "Have I?" Dylan tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Yeah, not in a bad way, just something feels off." She let out a small, breathy laugh, shaking her head. "I swear, if I hear one more thing about wedding jitters, I'm going to lose my mind." Dylan smirked, reaching for her hand. "Hey, I get it. It's a big deal. You're about to be Mrs. Carter." Ava forced herself to blush, looking down at their intertwined fingers. Dylan brushed a thumb over her knuckles. "You're not having second thoughts, right?" Ava's chest tightened, but her expression didn't falter. Instead, she squeezed his hand lightly, looking up at him with just the right amount of vulnerability. "Of course not." Dylan held her gaze for a second longer, as if searching for something beneath the surface. Then finally, he exhaled, grinning. "Good, because once you say I do, there's no backing out." Ava smiled back. If only he knew. And Jessie. Jessie was always there, just on the edges of it all, steady and unwavering. They met in secret, away from the eyes of Dylan and his circle. Late-night phone calls, hushed conversations in hidden corners, exchanged glances across crowded rooms. It was strange how quickly she had come to rely on him. How his presence seemed to ground her when everything else felt like it was spinning out of control. Tonight was no different. They sat across from each other in a quiet cafe far from the main streets, where no one would recognize them. Ava stirred her tea absent-mindedly, watching the way Jessie's fingers tapped against the table, deep in thought. He had that look again, the one where his jaw was clenched just slightly. The one where she could tell he was holding something back. She sighed. "You don't have to do this, you know." Jessie's eyes lifted to meet hers. "Do what?" "Help me." She set her spoon down, tilting her head. "You're risking a lot by getting involved in this. Dylan, your brother." Jessie scoffed, shaking his head. "Don't remind me." Ava gave him a small smile, still. Jessie leaned back, exhaling slowly. Ava, let's be honest here. You think I'd just sit back and watch him do this to you? She blinked, caught off guard by the intensity in his voice. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration flickering across his face. I've spent years watching Dylan manipulate people, use them like they're nothing, and I hated it. But this, he gestured between them. What he did to you, it's different. Ava swallowed, feeling a strange tightness in her chest. Why? Jesse hesitated for only a second before leaning in, his voice softer now. Because you didn't deserve this. Something in the air shifted. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world outside moved on without them. Cars passing by, distant laughter from another table, the soft hum of the coffee machines. But right here, between them, everything felt still. Ava dropped her gaze to her hands. I don't even know who I am anymore, she admitted, barely above a whisper. Everything I believed in, everything I thought was real, it was all a lie. Jesse didn't say anything right away. Then, after a pause, he reached across the table, his fingers brushing against hers. It wasn't forceful, wasn't demanding, just there, a quiet presence offering something she wasn't sure she deserved. She looked up, her breath catching slightly. You're still you, Jesse said, his voice steady. You're just seeing things clearly now. Ava stared at him, her heart pounding for reasons she didn't want to name. For the first time in days, she wasn't drowning. She wasn't gasping for air, struggling to keep herself from falling apart. She was just here, with him. The thought startled her. She pulled her hand back quickly, as if burned, tucking it into her lap. This isn't the time, is it? Jesse studied her for a long moment before exhaling a quiet laugh, shaking his head. No, it's not. Ava forced a smile, ignoring the strange feeling twisting inside her. Good, because I can't afford to be distracted. Jesse leaned back, watching her carefully. I get it. She expected him to say something else, maybe tease her, maybe push just a little, but he didn't. He just sat there, letting the silence settle, letting her be the one to move past it. And somehow, that made it worse. She cleared her throat, shifting in her seat. So, what's next? Jesse exhaled through his nose, nodding slightly as he let the moment slip away. We stick to the plan. Ava nodded, forcing herself to focus. Right. The plan. The revenge. Dylan. She had to remember why she was here, why any of this was happening. But as she walked out of that cafe that night, the cold air biting against her skin, she couldn't shake the feeling that something between her and Jesse had changed. And that scared her more than anything. The cathedral stood like a monument to perfection, bathed in soft golden light. Its towering stained glass windows cast colorful reflections across the polished marble floor. The air was thick with anticipation, murmurs of admiration passing between the elegantly dressed guests. Everything was flawless, the ivory roses lining the aisle, the soft melody of the string quartet, the crisp scent of expensive cologne and freshly cut flowers. It was exactly the kind of wedding Dylan wanted. Grand, luxurious, a spectacle. And there he stood, right at the altar, looking every bit the picture of a victorious groom. His tuxedo was perfectly tailored, his hair styled with just the right amount of effortlessness, his signature smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. He was at ease, shaking hands with a few high-profile guests in the front row, murmuring small pleasantries, knowing all eyes were on him. He looked like a man who had it all. He had no idea. He was about to lose everything. Ava stood just outside the cathedral doors, hidden from view. Her fingers wrapped tightly around her bouquet. Her pulse was steady, her breathing even. But beneath the surface, something electric crackled in her veins. She could hear the soft rustling of fabric as the bridesmaids adjusted their dresses. Brooke stood just a few feet away, her back turned. Ava didn't look at her. Couldn't. She focused on the weight of her gown instead. The intricate lace, the delicate pearl buttons running down her spine, the soft layers of tulle trailing behind her. Every detail had been chosen carefully, designed to make this moment perfect, and it was perfect, just not in the way Dylan had planned. A wedding planner peeked in, signaling that it was time. The doors were about to open. The world was about to shift. Ava inhaled deeply, lifting her chin. A slow, almost unnoticeable smile formed. Let the show begin. The heavy cathedral doors swung open, and the entire room fell silent. Every guest turned their heads, swiveling toward her, eyes widening with admiration. The bride, beautiful, poised, a vision in white. Ava stepped forward, her movement slow, deliberate, Each step down the aisle measured. She could feel the weight of every gaze, could hear the hushed whispers. Dylan's smirk widened as he watched her approach, his head tilting slightly in approval, like he was admiring a prize. And that's exactly what he thought she was, a prize. His prize. Ava held his gaze, her expression soft, unreadable. She let herself pretend, just for a moment, that she was still the woman he thought she was, the adoring, devoted fiancée. The woman so in love with him that she wouldn't see past his charming facade, past the empty promises, past the betrayal. She let him believe it. The priest cleared his throat, smiling warmly at the couple. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of..." Ava barely heard the words. Her heartbeat was steady, her mind sharp, focused on what came next. She could feel Jesse's presence somewhere behind her, standing quietly among the groomsmen. Steady, watchful, waiting. The weight of Dylan's hand still rested against hers, his fingers curled possessively around her own. His thumb traced slow, absent-minded circles on her skin. To anyone watching, it must have looked like an intimate, reassuring gesture. To Ava, it felt like a chain tightening around her wrist. She could feel the energy in the room, thick with admiration, expectation. Guests watched with soft smiles, waiting for the beautiful moment when she and Dylan would exchange vows, seal their love with a kiss, step into their future together. If only they knew. She glanced at Dylan, letting herself really look at him. The man she had once loved. The man who had once made her feel safe, cherished. The man she had planned to build a life with. Now, all she saw was a liar. A man so consumed by his own arrogance that he never once considered the possibility of losing. She let a small, almost imperceptible smile play on her lips. He was about to lose everything. The priest lifted his head, eyes warm, expectant. "Ava, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Ava didn't answer. Instead, she slowly lifted her free hand. The room stilled. Dylan frowned slightly, shifting beside her. "Ava?" he murmured, just loud enough for her to hear. She turned her head, meeting his gaze. For a moment, she said nothing, just let him sit in the silence, in the heavy, pulsing tension that had suddenly filled the space. Then, finally, she spoke. "Actually," Ava said, her voice calm, measured, "before I answer that, there's something I think everyone should see." Confusion flickered across Dylan's face, but before he could say a word, the massive LED screen behind them flickered to life. At first, there was nothing but static, a brief moment of distorted sound. Then the first image appeared. A photo. Dylan, shirtless, lying in bed, his arm wrapped around a woman who was very clearly not Ava. A gasp rippled through the room. Someone in the audience muttered a quiet, shocked, "Oh my God." Dylan's entire body stiffened. His grip on Ava's hand tightened, but she didn't flinch. Another photo appeared. Then another and another, each one worse than the last. Then came the messages. Screenshots of texts, vivid, undeniable. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Wish I was in your bed instead. Ava has no clue. It's almost too easy." More gasps, whispers grew louder, a wave of murmurs sweeping through the crowd. And then, the final blow. A video. Dylan's voice played through the speakers, crystal clear. "Ava? Please, she's just a trophy wife. Sweet, devoted, completely clueless." The room erupted. Dylan's mother let out a soft, strangled noise, pressing a hand to her mouth, her face pale. His father's expression turned to pure, cold disgust. Guests whispered furiously, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats, others openly gaping at the screen. Dylan stepped forward, panic flickering in his eyes. This is fake," he said quickly, his voice louder than necessary. "Someone's trying to set me up." Ava let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. "Really, Dylan? That's the best you've got?" The whispers grew louder, people turning to one another, murmuring in shock and disbelief. Dylan's desperation turned sharper. "Ava, listen to me." "Oh, I'm not finished." Silence. Ava let the moment stretch, let him sit in the weight of it. Then she inhaled slowly and said the words that would shatter whatever illusion Dylan had left. "Oh, and one more thing." She let her hand drop to her stomach, smoothing it over the delicate lace of her gown. "I'm pregnant." A few people in the audience gasped, the news hitting the room like a sudden gust of wind. Dylan's body jerked slightly, his eyes widening. You're pregnant?" Ava held his gaze. "Yes." For a split second, something flickered in Dylan's expression. Something unreadable. Hope, maybe. Some desperate attempt to salvage what little control he had left. But then, Ava smiled, and the final knife twisted. The father, she said, her voice light, almost conversational, is not you. Silence. Not just quiet, a deep, hollow silence, as if the entire room had forgotten how to breathe. Dylan's mouth parted slightly, but no sound came out. And then, movement. A chair scraped against the floor. A figure stood. Jesse, his presence was steady, calm, and when he spoke, his voice was clear, unwavering. Unlike you, Dylan, Jesse said, his gaze locked onto his brother's. I will cherish her. Gasps. Dylan staggered slightly, like he had just been physically struck. His face went pale. His hands curled into fists at his sides. You're lying. Ava didn't blink. Am I? Jesse took a slow step forward. I told you once before, Dylan, he murmured. You never deserved her. Dylan's breath was uneven now, his entire body tensed like he was on the verge of snapping. And Ava? She had never felt lighter. For a moment, there was nothing, just silence, thick, heavy, crushing. Then, all at once, the tension snapped. Dylan's face twisted in rage, his hands clenched at his sides, his chest heaved, his breathing ragged as his mind scrambled, for control, for an escape, for something, anything that could undo the disaster unraveling around him. His eyes flicked to the screen, still frozen on the incriminating texts. Then to his mother, who was staring at him like she didn't even recognize him. His father, face cold and unreadable. The guests, whispering furiously, their expressions ranging from shock to disgust. And then, to Jesse. Jesse, standing tall and calm, shoulders squared, looking at him with nothing but quiet certainty. Something in Dylan snapped. With a roar of fury, he lunged. The movement was fast, reckless, his hands reaching for Jesse like he could rip him apart with sheer force alone. But Jesse was ready. In a single smooth motion, he sidestepped, caught Dylan's wrist, and twisted. Dylan let out a sharp grunt of pain as Jesse wrenched his arm back, sending him stumbling. His knee buckled, and before he could catch himself, Jesse delivered a swift, controlled shove to his chest. Dylan went crashing to the ground. Gasps rang through the cathedral. Someone let out a muffled shriek. The sound of Dylan's body hitting the polished marble floor echoed through the vast space, sharp and unforgiving. Jesse didn't even flinch, he just stood over him, jaw tight, eyes steady. Sit down, Dylan, he said coolly. You've embarrassed yourself enough. Dylan groaned, rolling onto his side, his face burning with humiliation. He tried to push himself up, but his limbs felt weak. His pride, shattered beneath the weight of the stairs boring into him. Then, his father's voice cut through the air like a knife. Enough. Dylan froze. Slowly he turned his head toward the sound. His father, always composed, always in control, was staring at him with something Dylan had never seen before. Not disappointment, not anger, something worse. Disgust. You've shamed this family enough, Dylan's father said, his voice low, even, dangerous. I will not allow you to carry our name after this. Dylan's stomach twisted violently. Dad, you are no son of mine. The words landed like a death sentence. The room, already thick with tension, seemed to shrink around them. Dylan's breath stuttered. His vision blurred at the edges. He shook his head quickly, scrambling to his feet, hands shaking. No, you don't mean that. His father's expression didn't change. Get out. Dylan felt his world closing in. His father had always backed him, had always defended him, no matter what he did, no matter how ruthless his choices were. But now he was being cast aside like he was nothing. His mother turned her face away, unable to even look at him. His business associates in the front row were already checking their phones, no doubt sending out messages, severing ties, distancing themselves from him before the scandal spread further. He felt sick. Then, movement in the corner of his eye. Brooke, she was inching toward the side aisle, her hands clutching her purse tightly, trying to slip away unnoticed. But she wasn't that lucky. A voice rang out, one of Dylan's cousins, her tone sharp, accusing. Where do you think you're going? Heads turned. Attention shifted. Brooke froze, her face paling. I just need some air. Air? Another guest let out a bitter laugh. Oh, honey, you need a miracle. A ripple of cold amusement spread through the room. Ava watched as realization settled in Brooke's features. She had spent years carefully crafting her image, the sweet, trustworthy best friend. But now all anyone saw was a liar, a homewrecker. Brooke's eyes darted to Ava, as if silently begging her to do something. But Ava just tilted her head, expression unreadable. Brooke's lips parted, as if she wanted to plead, to explain. But what could she say? That she hadn't meant to betray Ava? That she hadn't planned on sleeping with her best friend's fiancé? That it just happened? Ava didn't care for excuses, and clearly neither did anyone else. Because before Brooke could open her mouth, another guest muttered, "Disgusting." Then another. The whispers grew louder, swirling around her, thick with judgment. Brooke's breath came out shakily. She turned to Dylan, like he was somehow still her lifeline, the one person who would take her side. But Dylan wasn't even looking at her. He was still frozen in place, shoulders tense, face blank. Brooke swallowed hard, realization hitting her like a slap. He wasn't going to defend her. The man she had risked everything for wasn't going to risk anything for her. Dylan was already thinking about himself, about survival, and she was collateral damage. Brooke let out a choked breath before quickly turning on her heel, shoving past the crowd, disappearing through the side door. No one stopped her, no one cared, and just like that, she was gone. Dylan stood in the wreckage of his own making, the weight of it all finally settling onto his shoulders. The respect he had spent years cultivating, gone, his family's support, gone, his power, gone. And Ava, she was still standing tall, her veil slightly askew, her bouquet still in her hands. Dylan finally forced himself to look at her, something desperate in his expression. "Ava," he started, voice rough. She smiled, not cruelly, not mockingly, just simply, like she had already moved on, like he was already forgotten. Dylan felt something inside him crumble. The silence that followed was different now. Not the sharp, stunned kind that had filled the cathedral moments ago when Dylan's betrayal was exposed. The priest stood awkwardly at the altar, shifting slightly as he cleared his throat. His eyes flicked between Ava, still standing in her wedding gown, and Dylan, who was still frozen in place, his world crumbling around him. The murmurs in the audience had died down, but the weight of 1,000 unsaid words still hung in the air. Then, finally, the priest spoke. His voice was hesitant, uncertain. Do we continue with this wedding?" Ava let out a soft breath, barely realizing she had been holding it, but there was still one thing left. Jesse. She turned slightly, her gaze finding him among the groomsmen. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but his presence was as steady as ever. His hands were still in his pockets, his jaw tight, his eyes locked onto hers with an expression she couldn't quite name. Then, as if making a decision in real time, he took a step forward, and then another. Ava's heart stuttered. The air between them shifted, crackling with something unspoken. Jesse didn't stop until he was right in front of her. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, like he was searching for something in her eyes. Then he dropped to one knee. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Ava's breath caught in her throat. Jesse reached for her hand, his grip warm, steady. "Marry me." Except, it wasn't a question, it wasn't even a plea, it was a promise, a declaration. Ava's fingers curled around his instinctively, her pulse hammering in her ears. She felt like the ground had tilted beneath her, like the entire world had shifted on its axis. "Jesse," she whispered, her voice barely there. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, slow and deliberate. "I know this isn't how it was supposed to happen," he said, voice low, quiet enough that only she could hear. "And I know you probably weren't expecting this." He glanced up at her, eyes unwavering. "But you deserve more than what Dylan ever gave you. You deserve someone who will stand by you, someone who won't betray you, someone who will love you the way you deserve to be loved." Ava felt her throat tighten. Jesse's hand squeezed hers gently, grounding her. "I won't hurt you like he did," he continued. "I won't lie to you. I won't use you. I will spend every single day proving to you that you are not a prize to be won, but a woman to be cherished." Ava's vision blurred slightly. She had spent so much time feeling like a fool, feeling used, discarded. She had spent nights wondering if she had ever really been loved at all. But standing here, looking down at Jesse, the man who had stood by her side through all of this, she realized something. He had always seen her, not as a trophy, not as someone to manipulate, just her. Her lips parted slightly, her heart pounding. But before she could say anything, a bitter, broken voice cut through the silence. "You have got to be kidding me, Dylan." He was still standing there, disheveled and humiliated, but now his expression was twisted with something else. Pure rage. His laugh was sharp, humorless. "This is some kind of joke, right? You think this changes anything?" Jesse didn't even look at him. His eyes remained locked onto Ava's, as if Dylan didn't exist. as if nothing else in the room mattered. And Ava? She felt something shift inside her. For so long she had been looking for closure, looking for some grand moment where she would finally feel like she had won. But she didn't need it, because Dylan had already lost. She squeezed Jesse's hand back, steadying herself. And then, without hesitating, without looking back, she nodded, yes. The cathedral erupted. Gasps, shouts, an excited murmur sweeping through the crowd. Jesse's lips parted slightly, like he hadn't expected her to actually say it. But then, his face broke into a slow, breathtaking smile. The kind of smile she had never seen on Dylan. The kind of smile that meant something. He stood up, his grip still firm in hers, his presence still warm and unwavering. The priest, who had clearly never dealt with a situation like this before, cleared his throat again. Well then, shall we continue? Ava exhaled softly, turning back toward the altar. She glanced at the aisle, the guests still gaping at her, at Dylan, at Jesse. She saw the stunned faces of Dylan's parents, the judgmental stares from the business elites, the sharp gleam of 100 phones recording every second of this moment. Then, she turned to Jesse and smiled. Yes, she said again, her voice stronger this time. Let's continue. Dylan let out a strangled sound, like he was about to say something, but his father's cold stare shut him down before he could even open his mouth. And just like that, the priest straightened his shoulders and began again. This time, when Ava said, "I do," she meant it. Jesse slid the ring onto Ava's finger, his touch lingering, warm, steady. The weight of the moment settled between them, raw and unshakable. The priest, still looking slightly stunned, cleared his throat once more. "You may now kiss the bride." Ava barely had a second to react before Jesse cupped her face gently, his hand steady as if this had always been meant to happen. His touch was warm, grounding. Nothing like the cold, calculated way Dylan had once held her. He hesitated for just a second, like he was giving her the chance to pull away, like he wanted this to be her choice. But she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in. The moment their lips met, the world around them disappeared. The gasps, the whispers, the weight of 100 stares. All of it faded into nothing. Jesse kissed her like a promise, like a vow that went deeper than words. And for the first time in a long time, Ava wasn't thinking about the past. She wasn't thinking about Dylan, about betrayal, about pain. She was thinking about this moment. About the way Jesse's hands held her like she was something precious. About the quiet intensity behind the way his lips moved against hers. Firm, but careful, deep, but patient, as if he was savoring every second. When they finally pulled apart, Jesse rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm against her skin. Ava's heart pounded. But she wasn't nervous, she was sure. A slow, knowing smile tugged at Jesse's lips. "You're stuck with me now," he murmured. Ava let out a soft laugh, the first real, genuine laugh she had felt in what seemed like forever. "Good," she whispered, and as the room erupted into cheers, as Jesse laced, his fingers laced through hers and pulled her close again. Ava knew this was exactly where she was meant to be. The reception was bathed in golden light. The soft glow of fairy lights strung between the trees cast everything in a warm, dreamlike haze. Laughter and music filled the air, blending seamlessly with the clinking of champagne glasses and the distant hum of conversation. The night was alive, full of celebration, of whispered congratulations, of stolen glances and new beginnings. And yet, standing in the shadows just beyond the reach of the lights, Dylan felt nothing but emptiness. He watched as Ava moved across the dance floor, her gown catching the light, her laughter soft, effortless. She looked radiant, glowing in a way he had never seen before. And beside her, Jesse. His hand rested securely on Ava's waist. His touch, gentle but certain, like he had always belonged there, like he always would. They swayed together, perfectly in sync, lost in a world that no longer included him. Dylan's fingers curled into fists at his sides. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Ava let out a soft sigh as she rested her head against Jesse's shoulder. The steady rhythm of their sway made her feel weightless. She exhaled slowly, studying him, really studying him. There was something different about the way he was looking at her now. Something familiar, yet entirely new. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jesse raised an eyebrow. "How long? What?" "How long have you felt this way?" Jesse didn't hesitate. "Since the first time you laughed at one of my terrible jokes." Ava let out an amused breath. Jesse, you always make terrible jokes. Exactly, he said, grinning, and you're the only one who ever laughed at them. She rolled her eyes playfully, but felt warmth spread through her chest. That's not true. Oh, it is, he said, dipping her slightly before pulling her back up. I used to test them out on Dylan first, you know, just to see if I had a shot. Ava bit her lip to keep from smiling. Jesse scoffed. He'd just give me that deadpan look and say, Jesus, Jesse, is this why Mom still asks if you have a real job? Ava laughed, the sound light and genuine. That sounds like him. Jesse smirked, his fingers grazing over her back in slow, lazy circles. You want to know something else? What? You made it really hard for me to hate him. Ava arched an eyebrow. Hate him? Jesse nodded, tilting his head as he studied her. You were always so damn loyal, always defending him, always looking at him like he was the best thing in the world. It was frustrating. Ava swallowed. Why? Because, Jesse said, brushing a stray curl from her face. I wanted to be the one you looked at like that. Ava's breath caught for a moment. She couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but let those words settle over her. Jesse must have noticed, because his smirk softened into something else, something deeper, something patient. He let the silence stretch between them as if giving her time to process what he had just admitted. And Ava? She didn't need time. She already knew. Maybe she had been blind before. But now she saw everything clearly. Ava exhaled, tilting her head up to meet his gaze. You don't have to wish for that anymore. Jesse stilled. And then, ever so slowly, a slow, breathtaking smile spread across his face. Yeah? He murmured. Ava nodded, her fingers curling around the lapel of his suit. Yeah? Jesse let out a soft breath, his forehead pressing lightly against hers. Guess I finally told a joke worth laughing at, he whispered. Ava laughed softly, shaking her head. Shut up and dance, Jesse. And as he twirled her under the glow of the fairy lights, as her laughter mixed with his, as they swayed together in a world that was finally theirs. Dylan, watching from the shadows, realized something. Some betrayals shatter you. Others, they set you free.